Sherlock Holmes and the Vanishing Library, and honoring audiobooks, original story, from the reminiscences of John H. Watson, M.D. Chapter 1, The Arrival at Greystone Hall. It was in the late October of 1893, as the gaslights of Baker Street flickered with a wan sort of melancholy, and the wind carried with it a scent of distant rain, that Sherlock Holmes received a letter of particular interest. I remember the morning with unusual clarity, for the hour was 7:30, and Holmes had already been awake, seated cross-legged upon the hearthrug, with the London Post discarded beside him, and the Persian slipper, his habitual tobacco repository, perched precariously on the mantel. "Watson," said he, without diverting his gaze from the flames, "how many private libraries have you known to vanish entirely without a trace?" I laid down my breakfast cup, intrigued by the question. "None that I can recall." "Precisely," he replied, reaching for a folded sheet of cream-colored stationery. "Then consider this an anomaly worthy of our attention." He handed me the letter, which bore the fine copperplate script of a lady, and was scented faintly with lavender. It was postmarked from Yorkshire, and the seal was an elaborate impression of a griffon rampant. "My dear Mr. Holmes, I write to you under the gravest of circumstances. My family's ancestral home, Greystone Hall, has suffered a most peculiar violation. A collection of rare books, some of them dating to the early Plantagenet reign and others acquired through generations of scholarly pursuit, has vanished from our private library. The room itself was locked and shows no signs of forced entry. I fear the culprit may lie within our own bloodline. I implore you to come at once. Greystone is remote and the local authorities ill-equipped to handle matters of such delicacy. You are my last resort. With urgency and respect, Lady Isadora Greystoke." I looked up at Holmes, who had risen and now stood at the window, observing the world as if he might divine truths from the shifting clouds above. "Do you suspect a family matter, then?" "My dear Watson," he said, turning to me with the glint in his eye that foretold an adventure of singular strangeness. "When a library disappears without visible means of removal, and the household is locked from within, we are not dealing with burglars. We are dealing with secrets." By noon, our travel arrangements had been completed. Mrs. Hudson packed our valises with her usual efficiency, though not without remarking on the ominous gloom of our destination. "Sounds like a ghost story, Mr. Holmes," she said, handing me my coat. "Mind the fog. It gets into the bones." We arrived at Greystone Hall 2 days hence, the journey carried out via the express to York and a hired landau for the final 20 miles. The countryside grew more desolate as we approached, the hedgerows wild and untamed, and the sky an oppressive iron dome. Greystone Hall loomed ahead as if carved from the landscape itself, a brooding edifice of grey stone and turrets half lost in the mist. The great oaken doors were opened by a butler whose name, as we would later learn, was Willoughby, an aged man with a face like weathered parchment and eyes that seemed to see too much. Lady Isadora Greystoke greeted us in the grand foyer. She was tall, of an austere beauty, with hair the color of dark honey, and a voice that bespoke refinement and sadness in equal measure. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," she said, extending a gloved hand. "You honor us with your presence." "The honor is ours, Lady Isadora," Holmes replied, bowing slightly. "Now, let us speak of vanished libraries." The tour of the house followed, and it became clear that Greystone was a mansion of secrets, corridors that led nowhere, doors that opened into darkness, and portraits whose eyes followed one with unnerving fidelity. The library, when we were shown it, was a cathedral of knowledge, or had been. Now its shelves yawned with emptiness, save for a few scattered tomes left behind as if to mock their absent brethren. "You say the room was locked?" Holmes asked, examining the doorway with care. "Yes," Lady Isadora said. "Only 3 people possess a key. Myself, my uncle Sir Reginald, and our steward Mr. Ashcombe." "And yet," Holmes murmured, "books do not simply walk away." It was then, in that dim and echoing room, with the scent of aged paper and the chill of mystery about us, that I realized, as I so often did, that we were standing at the threshold of another strange and perilous case, one whose pages had yet to be turned. Holmes stood silent for a long moment, his eyes scanning the towering shelves, his fingers trailing lightly along the carved wood of the wainscoting. Then, as if stirred from a trance, he turned to Lady Isadora with a sudden urgency. "Tell me, madam, Has anything else disappeared from the hall? Artifacts? Heirlooms? Curios of worth or sentiment? She shook her head slowly. No. Only the books. Hundreds of them, Mr. Holmes. Manuscripts with marginalia from my great-grandfather's hand, volumes from the monastic libraries of Lindisfarne and Hexham, and a Gutenberg leaf. Her voice caught at the memory. It was not a theft for profit, I am convinced. This was an act of desecration. Or concealment. Holmes nodded, and I could tell that the gears of his mind had already begun to turn with quiet ferocity. And who was the last to enter the library before the loss was discovered? My uncle, Sir Reginald. He retired there 3 nights ago, after supper. He claimed he was reviewing genealogical records. The next morning, the books were gone. Was he the one who discovered the absence? No, she said. That was Mr. Ashcombe, the steward. He oversees the library's condition and records. Holmes's brow furrowed. You said there was no forced entry, yet if the room remained locked and no windows were broken. The windows are barred, Lady Isadora interjected. Iron lattice original to the house. No one could have escaped through them, and there are no signs of tampering. I walked slowly around the perimeter of the room as the two conversed, noting the dust on the floor, or rather, the peculiar absence of it in certain areas. Holmes, I said, pointing to the parquet. These impressions, would you look? He joined me in an instant, crouching beside the faint outlines that had caught my eye, a series of square indentations in the dust, as if left by a heavy trunk or a stack of crates. Excellent, Watson, he murmured. Very good indeed. These marks are not from footfalls. They're far too angular and regular. Something was placed here and then removed. Lady Isadora leaned in. Could the books have been packed and carried out? Holmes stood. Yes, though that suggests time, coordination, and assistance. You say only 3 have access. One of them must have orchestrated this, unless someone found a way in without a key. She looked troubled. There is an old story, a legend among the servants, of passages beneath the hall. My father dismissed them as superstition. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Superstition is often the curtain behind which fact disguises itself. We must learn more about these alleged passages. As if summoned by our conversation, a soft knock came at the library door. Willoughby entered, bearing a silver tray with correspondence and a covered dish. Forgive the intrusion, my lady, he said. A note arrived from Mr. Ashcombe. He regrets his absence, citing a family matter in Whitby. He intends to return by the morrow. Holmes took the note and scanned it quickly, then frowned. How convenient. Watson, do you perceive a coincidence here? His sudden departure? I said. It does seem ill-timed. Holmes handed the note to Lady Isadora, then turned to me. We shall require lanterns, Watson, and perhaps a length of rope. She looked startled. You mean to investigate tonight? I do, Holmes said gravely. For if there is a passage beneath this house, it will not remain secret for long. Someone knows it well enough already. Lady Isadora's lips tightened. I shall have the cellar keys sent to your rooms. But I caution you, the foundation of Greystone runs deep, and not all that lies beneath is stone and mortar. With that enigmatic warning, she departed, her footsteps fading into the vast, echoing corridors. Holmes watched her go with an expression I had come to know well. Part admiration, part calculation, and wholly absorbed in the case at hand, he turned to me with a smile faint and razor-sharp. Come, Watson, let us unpack our lanterns. Tonight, we descend. The manor lay hushed beneath a swath of moonlight, its turrets casting dagger-like shadows over the ivy-clad walls. A cold wind whispered through the heather fields beyond, rattling the glass panes in their leaded frames. Holmes and I stood before a narrow stone stairwell hidden behind an oaken panel in the wine cellar, which Lady Isadora's footman, young George, had nervously revealed upon Holmes's insistence. It's never opened, sir, George had muttered, his voice tight as a violin string. Master Ashcombe always said it led nowhere but rubble. My grandfather, rest his soul, said otherwise. Holmes regarded the young man with a flicker of curiosity. What did he say, precisely? George swallowed. Said the old lords of Greystone smuggled priests and papers through the tunnels when Cromwell's men marched. Claimed the passages run beneath the hall and into the forest yonder. But no one's been down in generations. Not since the wall collapsed during the Great Storm of 78. Holmes's gaze intensified. And yet the panel opens smoothly, well oiled. Recently used. George turned pale. I wouldn't know about that, sir. Holmes dismissed him gently. That will be all. George, you've been most helpful. The lad departed hastily, leaving us with 2 storm lanterns, a length of stout rope, and our own anticipation. The stairwell yawned before us, its steps descending into a darkness so complete it might have been primordial. After you, Holmes? I offered, half in jest. Nonsense, Watson, Holmes said lightly, his eyes bright in the flicker of his lamp. You, as always, shall have the honor of being my shield. I chuckled, and together we descended, boots echoing on the cold stone. The air grew damp and earthy, rich with the scent of centuries. Cobwebs clung to the low ceiling, and once or twice we heard the faint trickle of water somewhere below. The tunnel narrowed after a dozen yards, forcing us to stoop. Holmes examined the walls as we progressed. Note the brickwork here, he whispered. This portion is Tudor, perhaps late Elizabethan, but it was reinforced more recently. See here, this mortar is scarcely 20 years old. So someone knew of this passage in modern times, I surmised. Holmes nodded. Indeed, and if they were clever enough to use it to smuggle out a library, they would have made ample preparation. Somewhere ahead, a faint breeze stirred the flame of Holmes's lantern. He halted, eyes gleaming with excitement. Airflow, he muttered. There's an opening ahead. The passage ended in a heavy wooden door bound with rusted iron. Holmes pressed his ear against it, listening. All's silent, he said. Shall we? The door opened with a reluctant groan. Beyond was a low chamber lined with stone shelves, empty now save for fragments of parchment, cobwebs, and a half-rotted trunk. Holmes stepped inside, sweeping the beam of his lantern across the walls. There, he said softly, pointing to the floor. A trail of crushed dust and scuffed prints ran across the chamber and toward a narrow flight of steps ascending behind another panel of wood. At the top, we emerged into what appeared to be a small cabinet room, a sort of forgotten annex off the west wing of the house. Holmes found the mechanism easily, a simple spring latch hidden in the carved molding of a bookshelf. With a faint click, the panel slid open, revealing the tapestry-hung corridor beyond. Clever, Holmes murmured. Very clever. A perfect means of transporting heavy volumes without passing through the main halls. We exited the chamber and followed the corridor to the upper floors. Holmes requested we visit the steward's office next, located in a narrow hallway behind the servants' quarters. A dusty room, its windows shuttered, and its contents largely unremarkable, until Holmes pulled open the lower drawer of the desk. Watson, he said, drawing forth a leather-bound ledger. Ashburnham's inventory of the library. And see, the final entry was made only days before his departure. The final entries were curious indeed. Several books were marked with a tiny cross in red ink, including one Holmes tapped sharply with his finger. Ah, he said, the Codex Hermeticum, 16th century, Venetian binding, inscribed in Greek, Latin, and an obscure cipher. Well, well. He flipped through the ledger until he found a note scribbled in the margin. See GP for cross-references. Basement folios unindexed. GP, I repeated. Initials? Holmes looked thoughtful. Or a code, possibly a location. But this confirms it. Ashburnham knew more than he let on. I suspect his return tomorrow will prove enlightening. He closed the ledger, slipping it into his satchel. Come, Watson, we've earned a few hours of rest. Tomorrow, we speak with Sir Reginald. The next morning, under a sky streaked with pale orange, Holmes and I took breakfast in the morning room overlooking the south gardens. Lady Isadora joined us, her face composed but sleepless. Sir Reginald is in his study, she informed us. He knows you wish to speak with him. Holmes bowed. And you, Lady Isadora, may I ask your own thoughts on your uncle? You said you suspect someone within the family. She hesitated. He is a difficult man, arrogant, vain, but not a thief. Not even if he stood to gain? Holmes asked gently. She looked out the window. He lost heavily in the Turkish stocks last spring, but I cannot imagine him selling our legacy. Not Reginald. We thanked her and made our way to the east wing, where Sir Reginald sat at a vast mahogany desk, his long fingers laced before him. He was a tall, hawk-nosed man with a thin mustache and the eyes of a man accustomed to command. You must be the detective, he said with barely disguised disdain, and his chronicler. Dr. John Watson, I replied coolly. And this is Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Indeed, my niece's latest diversion. He gestured brusquely to the chairs opposite. Ask your questions. Holmes smiled faintly. Thank you. You were the last to see the library intact, Sir Reginald? I was. I spent an hour perusing our family's heraldic charts. Then I retired. You noticed nothing unusual? No signs of intrusion? None. I locked the door myself. Holmes leaned forward. Have you ever heard of the passage beneath the house? Reginald's lips thinned. Superstitious rubbish, the tales of nursemaids and drunkards. Yet it exists. We descended it last night. Books were carried through it. A passage runs from the library to the servants' wing and beyond. A flicker, very slight, crossed Sir Reginald's features. Then someone else found it. Likely Ashcombe. He's a sly one. Were you aware that Ashcombe kept a separate inventory? That he marked several rare books, including the Codex Hermeticum, with a red cross? At that, Sir Reginald sat up straighter. What nonsense is this? The Codex is little more than alchemical gibberish. Holmes smiled. To most, but it also contains an obscure reference to a relic long thought legendary. The Seal of Eberachum. According to the Marginalia, the Codex is one of 3 texts whose combined verses point to the seal's resting place. Reginald said nothing. Holmes stood. Your family's library was not stolen for coin, Sir Reginald. It was taken to unlock a secret buried beneath your very estate. One someone was willing to betray their blood to obtain. Sir Reginald rose from his chair, his expression drawn tight with discomfort, though whether it was from guilt or insult was not yet clear to me. You dare to suggest, he said slowly, that some medieval trinket is at the heart of this absurd affair? I suggest, said Holmes evenly, that the Codex and its companions were not stolen at random. The thief, or thieves, had knowledge of what lay hidden within those pages. Someone among you is not merely a bibliophile, Sir Reginald. They are a treasure hunter. Sir Reginald's hand trembled as he reached for his pipe. That will be all, gentlemen. Holmes inclined his head. For now. As we made our way back down the corridor, Holmes spoke in a low voice. He knew. Not everything, but something. Did you note how his composure cracked at the mention of the seal? I did, I replied. Do you believe he's our man? Holmes shook his head. Too blunt, too proud. No, I believe Sir Reginald is a red herring, an unwitting obstacle perhaps, but not the architect of this affair. Our Mr. Ashcombe, on the other hand, has made himself conspicuously scarce. We passed the great hall on our way to the drawing room and encountered a tall, gaunt woman dusting a porcelain display. She introduced herself as Mrs. Lavington, the housekeeper. You'll be wanting to see the steward's room, she said before we could even ask. I always knew he was hiding something. Never liked visitors near his quarters. With that, she led us up a narrow servant's stairwell to a cramped but orderly chamber tucked beneath the eaves. Ashcombe's room was spare, a narrow bed, a battered chest, and a small writing desk under the dormer window. Holmes went straight to the desk and began rifling its drawers with methodical precision. Watson, he said suddenly, pulling out a sheaf of yellowed pages tied with twine. Correspondence. Look at this. The letters, addressed to Professor G. Ptolemy of the Athens Historical Society, were written in Ashcombe's unmistakably elegant hand. The subject, rare texts from British collections and the coded mythologies of pre-Roman Britain. The initials match the ledger. GP, Holmes murmured. Ashcombe was in correspondence with a foreign buyer. Likely the same party who commissioned the theft. One letter in particular caught his eye. It was dated 6 weeks prior and written in haste. Professor, the Codex confirms it. The seal lies beneath the crypt chapel, the passage marked in the 3rd folio's margin. I must act before Reginald discovers the missing text. Greystone's legacy will not remain buried. A. Holmes sat back, tapping the paper thoughtfully. The chapel, Watson. That must be our next destination. But why would Ashcombe return? I asked. If he planned to sell the books, why not vanish altogether? Because, Holmes said, he found more than he expected. He believes something lies beneath this estate, not just a seal, but a cache of some kind. Perhaps he returned to retrieve it himself, or perhaps he never truly left. That evening, just before sundown, we took lantern and spade to the ruined chapel at the northern edge of the estate. Once a site of family worship, it had long since fallen into disuse, its roof half collapsed, and its pews rotting with age. Moss covered the flagstones, and the air reeked of damp decay. Holmes moved among the gravestones with the reverence of a surgeon. Near the altar, he found what he had hoped, A worn effigy of a knight, one booted foot resting on a lion's head, his shield bearing a faintly visible griffon, the same that adorned the Greystoke crest. "The founder," Holmes said. "Sir Alaric de Greystoke. Died 1272. He knelt beside the statue and ran his fingers along the edges. "The base is hollow. Help me shift him, Watson." With some effort and more than a little protest from our aging limbs, we managed to slide the stone knight a foot to the left. Beneath, a trapdoor lay concealed beneath a layer of compacted dust and grit. Holmes exhaled, lantern trembling slightly in his hand. "It seems our steward was correct. Ready, old friend?" "After you," I said grimly. The tunnel was rough-hewn and much older than the others. No brickwork here, only raw earth and oaken beams, some of them blackened as if by ancient fire. We descended in silence, our footfalls muffled in the loamy soil. At the end of the passage was a vault, circular, domed, lined with niches carved into the stone. In the center stood a pedestal. Upon it, encased in glass and resting on a cushion of crimson velvet, was an object of singular craftsmanship, a golden disc the size of a man's palm, engraved with runes and symbols that shimmered faintly in the light. "The seal of a Baracum," Holmes breathed. "It exists." And then came the sound, faint at first but growing louder. Footsteps. Someone descending behind us. We turned, weapons at the ready, and found ourselves face to face with Ashcombe, but it was not the expression of a man caught in crime. No, he looked wild, disheveled, and desperate. "You don't understand," he said hoarsely. "They're coming." They followed me back. I thought I could keep the secret. I didn't mean for them to. A shot rang out. Ashcombe staggered, then fell. From the shadows behind him, a figure emerged. Cloaked in black, face obscured. Holmes moved like lightning, tackling the intruder. The lantern crashed, plunging us into near darkness, save for the eerie glow of the seal. I found myself wrestling with the assailant's arm, a woman's arm, slender but strong, until Holmes pinned her against the stone. When he pulled back her hood, we all froze. "Lady Isadora?" I gasped. She looked at Holmes with icy defiance. "You shouldn't have come here, Mr. Holmes. You should have left well enough buried." Holmes's voice was low, almost sad. "You orchestrated the entire thing." She laughed bitterly. "I did what had to be done. My family squandered this estate for generations. I was going to restore it, sell the books, find the treasure. Ashcombe was loyal, but weak. He wanted to preserve it. I wanted to use it." Holmes glanced at Ashcombe, who groaned faintly, blood pooling beneath him. "And now?" I asked. She shrugged. "Now? I suppose I die in disgrace." Holmes shook his head. "Not disgrace, madam. Merely justice." Chapter 2. The Seal of Eberacum. It is one thing to chase shadows and another entirely to grasp one in your hands. That thought lingered with me as Holmes and I stood at the mouth of the crypt, lantern light guttering in the fetid air, the blood of Mr. Ashcombe staining the stone beneath us, and Lady Isadora Greystoke, heir to a noble name and now a would-be conspirator, standing pale and silent, her pistol clattering to the floor. Holmes, as ever, was already 3 steps ahead of us all. He knelt beside Ashcombe, examining the wound with surgical focus. "A clean entry," he murmured. "Below the clavicle. Likely a cracked rib, but no arterial spray. You're fortunate, Mr. Ashcombe. Your mistress lacks precision." Ashcombe coughed, blinking through the haze of pain. She meant to scare, not to kill. Isadora, who until then had borne the stoicism of a statue, let out a trembling breath and pressed a hand to her mouth. "I never meant. I only needed time," she said. "Time to decipher the rest of the books. To find it all before the buyer lost interest." Holmes turned to her. "You had already found it. This," he gestured to the pedestal and the gleaming golden seal resting upon it, "was the end of the trail, the mystery in full." "No," she whispered. "This is only the key. There's more. There must be." Holmes stared at her for a long moment. "How far are you prepared to go, Lady Isadora, in pursuit of something that may not exist?" She said nothing. We returned her to the house under quiet guard. Lady Isadora did not struggle nor speak. Once within the walls of Greystone, she vanished into the west wing under the eye of the servants. Holmes sent a telegram to Scotland Yard requesting Inspector Lestrade's assistance, but it would be a day's journey at least before he arrived from London. As the grey of dawn crept over the fields of Yorkshire, I found myself seated once more in the drawing room, a blanket across my shoulders, watching Holmes pace before the hearth. "You believe her," I said finally. about the seal being only part of it. Holmes stopped. Not entirely, but she believes it, and belief is a potent motivator. He reached into his coat and drew out the red-crossed inventory ledger once more, flipping it open to the page marked Codex Hermeticum. 3 books, he said. We've recovered 1. The Codex. The other 2 remain missing. I frowned. But if Ashcombe was helping her, why wouldn't she have had them all? Holmes tapped the edge of the page. Because Ashcombe betrayed her. He found the seal, yes. But something in that final reference made him hesitate. I believe he hid the other volumes before she could use them. And where? I asked. That, my dear Watson, is the question. He turned suddenly and crossed the room to the library. The chamber had been stripped of its former grandeur. The shelves lay mostly bare, their volumes pillaged. But Holmes walked directly to a bookcase still standing near the hearth. Look here, he said. The panel behind the shelves bore faint scratches, horizontal, deliberate. Holmes ran his finger along the edge and smiled. A false back, he said. Give me a hand. We shifted the case forward, revealing a cavity behind it. Within were 3 bundles wrapped in cloth. Holmes lifted one, then another with reverence. He unwrapped the first, a thick manuscript bound in cracked calfskin, Liber Septentrionalis, a survey of pre-Roman artifacts and hidden shrines. The second bore a Latin title in gold-leafed script, Aurorae Saxonicae. The other 2 volumes, Holmes whispered, the complete triad, the seal, the text, the cipher. He sat on the floor like a schoolboy unwrapping a toy, and for several minutes the only sound in the room was the rustle of ancient vellum. Then Holmes looked up at me, his eyes glittering. Watson, he said, these books do not merely describe the seal's history. They detail its function, its purpose. This is no trinket. It is a map. A map to what? I asked. Holmes turned the codex around so that I could see. On the inner margin, beneath a line of coded Greek, was a tiny geometric figure, a triangle intersected by 3 arcs. The same figure repeated in Aurorae Saxonicae, this time etched beside a diagram of subterranean chambers. Holmes tapped the page. To the treasure of Eberacum, he said. If such a thing exists, it lies beneath this house, deeper than the chapel crypts, beneath even the original Roman ruins. This place was not merely built upon old stone. It was built to guard something. My mouth had gone dry. And Lady Isadora? She was close, but not close enough. Her knowledge was partial. Ashcombe, with the full cipher, feared what might happen if she succeeded. He closed the book. We must return to the tunnels, but not the ones we've seen. I suspect there's a second network, Roman in origin. If the seal is a key, we must find the door it opens. By midday, we had mapped the locations mentioned in the margins of the books. One stood out, a place referred to only as the Mithraeum beneath the hearthstone. With that cryptic name as our guide, Holmes led me down once more into the undercroft of Greystone Hall. This time we ventured to the very foundations, the part of the house said to be untouched since the Norman conquest. Beneath the grand hearthstone in the great hall, concealed beneath loose bricks and a cunningly fitted iron ring, we found it. A descending shaft, round and dry, leading into darkness. We climbed down on a rope ladder left behind by someone else, Ashcombe, most likely. The chamber we entered was like none I had seen. Columns of Roman masonry rose around us, their capitals engraved with bulls, ravens, and suns. At the center stood an altar stone, and at its base, a concave impression shaped precisely to hold the seal of Eberacum. Holmes placed it into the slot. The ground trembled. With a groan like a breath held for centuries, a portion of the floor shifted backward, revealing a spiral staircase of limestone. We descended slowly, our lanterns flickering against the carved walls. Below, in a chamber no mortal eyes had seen in living memory, was a vault containing the hoarded wonders of 3 empires: Roman silver, Saxon gold, scrolls in Greek and Druidic tongue, idols of forgotten gods, and amidst it all, a sarcophagus of black stone. On its lid was an inscription in Latin: "Here lies Alaric, keeper of the seal, last guardian of the gate." We stood in silence. Holmes removed his hat. "We've found it," he whispered. He turned to me, his voice thick with wonder. "This is not theft, Watson. This is legacy. Greystone was never a home. It was a lock. And we've just found the key." Holmes did not touch the sarcophagus at first. He simply stood before it, arms folded, eyes narrowed in that way he had. as though he were peeling away layers of history with the sheer force of his perception. The silence in the chamber was so absolute, so untouched by the clamor of the world above, that I fancied we had stepped through time itself. There was something almost indecent about speaking aloud here, as if our voices might disturb the dead more thoroughly than any spade. I had always considered the legends apocryphal, Holmes said at last, his voice a whisper absorbed by the ancient stone. That the Romans, retreating from Britannia, left behind caches of wealth, a romantic notion, too vague, too frequently retold. But this, he stepped forward and placed his palm flat against the carved inscription. This is no myth. As Holmes began his study of the sarcophagus's engravings, I turned my attention to the vault itself. It was a vast octagonal space, perhaps 30 feet across, its walls cut with alcoves housing reliquaries and artifacts of a dozen vanished peoples. The air was dry, preserved by some forgotten alchemy of Roman engineering. An ancient brazier, now long cold, lay in the corner, surrounded by ash still pungent with long-spent incense. It was no mere tomb. It was a temple. "Look here, Watson," Holmes called. I crossed to him and saw what he had uncovered. The lid of the sarcophagus was fitted not with cement or nails, but with an interlocking mechanism shaped in the pattern of the seal itself. Holmes retrieved the golden disc and held it before the stone as if offering tribute. "It requires alignment," he muttered. 3 sigils, the bull, the serpent, and the sun, arranged thus. I watched, heart racing, as he slowly inserted the seal into a recess in the stone. With a click that reverberated like a bell tolling beneath the earth, the lid shifted. It took both of us to push the great slab aside. What lay within chilled me more than a corpse ever could. The interior was empty, save for a second chamber, carved directly into the stone beneath, and in that a scroll case, ornately fashioned of ivory and silver, bound with a cord of woven copper. Holmes lifted it carefully. The case was warm to the touch, despite the chill of the crypt. "Sealed tight," he said. "Unbroken. Watson, you are a man of letters. Do you recognize the craftsmanship?" I examined the object and shook my head. Greek, perhaps. But the iconography. Look at these stylized hounds, entwined with oak leaves. It's older than Byzantium. Celtic, but refined. Holmes nodded. "Precisely. A hybrid piece, Romano-British craftsmanship, very likely unique." He set the scroll case gently into his satchel. "We must examine this above. I would not trust the air here to preserve it much longer." But before we could begin our ascent, a faint clatter echoed from the stairwell. We turned as one, every nerve taut. A figure emerged, gaunt, wild-eyed, soot-streaked, and for a moment I did not recognize him. Ashburnham. He stumbled into the vault, leaning against the wall. His wound, dressed crudely with torn linen, still bled. "Stop," he croaked. "You don't understand. The scroll, it must not leave this place." Holmes approached cautiously. "You followed us." Ashburnham nodded, sweat dripping from his brow. I read it, in the codex. The prophecy. The scroll isn't just a record. It's a ritual, a safeguard. If it's removed." His knees gave out and he collapsed to the floor. I knelt beside him, feeling for a pulse. It was weak, but present. Holmes looked at me grimly. "We must get him to the surface, now." We made the ascent slowly, carefully. Ashburnham drifted in and out of consciousness, muttering fragments of Latin and half-coherent warnings. When we emerged into the ruined chapel, the sun had passed its zenith and cast golden shafts through the broken rafters. The transition from vault to ruin was jarring, as if we had emerged from beneath the very skin of the earth. Inside Greystone Hall, I administered what care I could. Holmes secured the scroll in a locked case and left it under the watch of Mrs. Lavington, who received it with the solemnity of a nun guarding a holy relic. Ashburnham, once stable, summoned Holmes to his bedside. "I tried," he whispered. "Tried to keep her from it, but she was clever. Too clever. I should have burned the books. But I thought someone should know." "Know what?" Holmes asked softly. Ashburnham's eyes opened wide. "The true origin of the seal. It's not Roman, not truly. It's older. The codex is a translation, a copy of something predating even Eboracum. The seal isn't a map, Holmes. It's a lock. And the scroll." He clutched Holmes's arm, voice trembling. "The scroll opens it." Holmes went very still. "And what lies behind that lock?" Ashburnham hesitated. Then, a door. To what? Ashburnham's eyes fluttered closed. To something that never should have been remembered. That night, Holmes and I sat in the drawing room. the fire crackling quietly between us. Neither of us touched the tea Mrs. Lavington had prepared. "You believe him," I said. Holmes rubbed his temples. "I believe he believes it." "But you think the scroll is just a historical document." He didn't answer at first. Then he said, "I do, but I have also seen enough in my life to know that belief, when coupled with history, becomes something far more dangerous than either." I sipped my cooling tea, feeling a chill despite the fire. "Watson," Holmes said at last, "this mystery is no longer about theft. It is about legacy, about fear, and about what some men will do to control the stories that shape them." He looked toward the sealed case containing the scroll. "I will read it, but not alone." Chapter 3. The Scroll of Alaric. I must confess I had once taken comfort in the rigidity of logic, in the crisp lines Holmes so often drew between what was and what was not. There had been times in our adventures when the inexplicable had brushed against us. A hound wreathed in flame, a spectral lady in white, a whisper from the mouth of a tomb. But always Holmes had stripped them bare with deductive clarity. It was the miracle of his mind. He did not flinch before the abyss, for he had always found a ladder within it. But that evening at Greystone Hall, with the wind scraping at the windows and the fire casting elongated shadows against the oak-paneled walls, I saw something in Holmes's face I had never seen before. Hesitation. The sealed scroll, the scriptum Alarici, as Holmes now called it, lay between us on the table, untouched since Ashcomb's collapse. Its copper bindings seemed to glow with internal fire in the flickering lamplight. I found myself staring at it as one might a venomous serpent, fascinated, repelled, helplessly drawn. "I must read it," Holmes said at last, "but I do not relish doing so in solitude." "I'm with you," I replied without hesitation. He nodded once, gravely. "Then let us proceed." He produced a slender blade from his coat, not his usual scalpel, but a letter opener of ivory, stained with age. With slow, deliberate care, he sliced through the wax seal binding the scroll's copper latch. A faint breath of air escaped, dry, papery, ancient. The scent was not unpleasant, but it bore with it the unmistakable tang of secrets long entombed. Inside, the scroll was wrapped in linen so finely woven it disintegrated to dust in Holmes's fingers. Beneath it, tightly wound and surprisingly intact, lay parchment inscribed with ink of deepest crimson. Not rusted, not faded, but vibrant, as though freshly penned. Holmes unrolled the first section and read silently, lips moving. "It's a cipher," he murmured, but a cipher built on translation. Latin, filtered through archaic Greek with underlying Brythonic idioms. It's a linguistic palimpsest. He turned to me. "I will read aloud. Interrupt me if you hear something of significance." He cleared his throat and began. "In the reign of Constantius, under the waning sun, came the last to guard the threshold. I, Alaric, son of no nation and heir to the temple of Mithras, write these words in shadow and stone, for they must not rise again in fire. To those who find this, I bid you turn back, for beneath you lies not treasure, but memory, and memory unchained is more terrible than any blade." Holmes paused, his brow furrowed. "A warning," I said quietly, "yes, and more than that, a creed." He continued reading. "We kept it sealed, as our fathers did, and theirs before them. A truth not meant for kings or empires. The seal, crafted not by Rome, but by those who came before, is the key to the gate to the archive of all things forgotten. It was not gold they buried here. It was knowledge. Secrets so old, the stones have forgotten them. Names no tongue may speak without cost. The priests of the old path carved them into flesh and fire and left them for us to guard." Holmes stopped again, and this time he rubbed his eyes. "I thought this would be a record of treasure, Watson, perhaps some heretical ritual. But this," he gestured to the text, "this speaks not merely of history, but of memory as a force, as a thing capable of danger." "Like a plague," I whispered. "Buried knowledge, too dangerous to survive." Holmes gave a half nod. "Consider what such a thing implies, that this place was not merely sacred to the Romans, but chosen because it sat atop something far older." He resumed. "We buried the 9 tablets in a vault beyond the sarcophagus, one for each of the fallen names. They must remain unread. They twist the mind, bend the will, they unmake the self. Only the seal holds them fast, only the seal and the forgetting." Holmes's hands had begun to tremble. He set the scroll down carefully and leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the dark window beyond us. "Watson," he said at last, "do you recall the excavation at Herculaneum?" I blinked. Of course. They unearthed a library sealed by Vesuvius, charred scrolls still legible. And the Vox Ignota? The scroll none could translate? Yes. I believe this is related, perhaps even an antecedent. But Holmes, you can't mean. He stood abruptly. I mean only this. Somewhere beneath Greystone there is another chamber, the vault beyond the sarcophagus, and within it, if this scroll is to be believed, lies something men have died to bury. A long silence followed. Then Holmes turned, fire blazing behind his eyes. We must go back. Tonight? I asked, startled. Before Lestrade arrives, before this place is locked in bureaucracy and skepticism, we are on the cusp, Watson, of something vast, perhaps terrible, but real. I stood too. Then let's be about it. Holmes fetched the lanterns, extra oil, rope, and a revolver apiece. He said nothing as we prepared, but I recognized the gleam in his eye. The same fierce light that had danced there on the moors of Devon, in the alleys of Limehouse, and in the opium dens of Calcutta. By the time we reached the mouth of the shaft beneath the hearthstone once more, the stars were wheeling overhead in a clear winter sky. We descended in silence. The vault was unchanged. The sarcophagus remained open, the air inside undisturbed. But now, with the scroll's testimony fresh in our minds, it seemed darker, more expectant. Holmes knelt beside the rear wall and examined the carvings anew. There, he said, pointing. See the outline? A false panel. I looked closely, and indeed, barely visible, a seam in the stone described a perfect arch. Together, we traced it with our fingers. There must be a mechanism, Holmes murmured, and then I saw it, a tiny depression near the altar. The seal fitted exactly. With a click and a groan of unseen gears, the rear wall of the vault withdrew, revealing a narrow, descending corridor cut into the bedrock. The air that emerged was so cold it burned the lungs. Holmes, I said, my voice suddenly hoarse. Are you certain? He gave a grim smile. I am never certain, Watson, but I am compelled. Lanterns raised, hearts in our throats, we stepped into the darkness. The corridor sloped downward at a shallow angle, its floor surprisingly smooth, as though worn by centuries of cautious footfall. The walls bore no adornment, no script or carving, only the silence of deep stone. It was not the silence of an uninhabited place, but the held breath of something watching. Holmes took the lead, his lantern casting long shadows that danced over the damp rock. I followed closely, revolver in hand, every muscle braced. Our footsteps echoed, the only sound in that subterranean abyss. After several minutes of careful descent, the corridor opened into a wide antechamber, circular and domed. Its construction bore no mark of Roman influence. No columns, no mosaics, no marble. This was older, cruder. The stone was rough-hewn, veined with minerals that glimmered faintly even in the dim lamplight, and the air was colder than any winter night in London. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal of black basalt. Resting atop it were 9 tablets. Each was carved from a different substance: obsidian, alabaster, jade, ivory, even what appeared to be petrified wood. But it was the engravings that seized the breath in my throat. The script on the tablets writhed and shimmered, as though the characters were etched not in ink or chisel, but in motion itself. Holmes approached, lantern raised high. I don't recognize any of these languages, he murmured. Not cuneiform, not runes, not hieroglyphs. And yet... He traced a finger an inch above the first tablet, not quite daring to touch it. There is familiarity here, the curvature of the lines, some form of logogrammatic structure. These are not merely phonetic symbols. They represent concepts. I crouched beside the pedestal. You said the scroll called them the names of the fallen. Yes. 9 of them. He scanned the chamber, and each tablet is distinct. Perhaps each one is devoted to a specific entity. The word echoed in the chamber, and I shivered. There was no other term for it. They were not gods, not in any traditional sense, and yet divinity, ancient, brutal, and alien, clung to the air around us like smoke. Holmes stepped back. We must not touch them. I nodded. There may be mechanisms here. Traps, or worse. He turned his lantern toward the walls of the chamber. Strange reliefs emerged from the darkness. Less images, more impressions, like the memories of forms rather than the forms themselves. Twisting geometries, angular figures without symmetry, not drawn, but somehow imposed on the stone. Holmes inhaled sharply. These symbols, I've seen similar patterns recorded in the Voynich manuscript. That undeciphered codex? Yes, but these are more refined, less chaotic. He tilted his head, listening. Watson, do you hear it? I strained my ears. A low, rhythmic thrum, so faint it might have been mistaken for a trick of the blood in one's ears. But it was there, and it was growing louder. Holmes turned sharply. Back. We moved quickly. The corridor behind us had not changed, but the darkness had thickened, grown almost textured. Our lanterns, once powerful, seemed to shrink in their radiance, their light swallowed by the ancient gloom. When we reached the original vault, Holmes sealed the false panel behind us with the seal. The quiet that followed was immediate and suffocating. We climbed out of the shaft as dawn touched the horizon with silver. Back in the sitting room of Greystone Hall, we collapsed into chairs like men returned from a war. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Then Holmes said quietly, "That was not a vault of knowledge." "No." "It was a prison," I nodded slowly. "You believe the scroll now." "I believe it was a warning, not a record. That man, Ashburnham, wasn't guarding a secret. He was safeguarding the world from it." Holmes stood and crossed to the fire, staring into the embers. "And someone knew. Someone within this family. That's why the books were taken. Not for their value, not even for their historical significance, but because one of them contained the reference to that chamber." "A map?" "Not a literal one. A linguistic key, something embedded within the text. A passage, a riddle, an epigraph. Something so obscure it went unnoticed for centuries. Until now." He turned toward me. "Watson, we must discover which book it was. The volumes were catalogued. Perhaps the ledger will offer a clue." "I'll begin with it at once." But Holmes held up a hand. "First we rest. We've been in darkness too long. Let daylight clear our heads." And so we slept, though sleep did not come easily. My dreams were filled with visions of ink that bled across stone, of names whispered in dead tongues, and of a door carved into the bones of the earth, sealed with words that should never be spoken aloud. When I awoke, sunlight streamed through the window, and Holmes was already at work, catalogue in hand, his eyes alight with furious determination. "The Codex Ashburnhamensis," he said without looking up. It was listed in the collection, described as Latin theological miscellanea, provenance uncertain. That's our starting point. He handed me the entry. "Third shelf, upper left alcove, or rather it was." I read the listing. "Holmes, this book was marked with an asterisk." "Yes," which, according to the curator's notes, denoted items on loan or pending restoration. Someone removed it before the others vanished. Which means someone knew exactly what they were looking for. Or if the pieces were falling into place. Holmes paced as he spoke. The disappearance of the library was no act of chaos. It was a surgical strike. One book contained the reference that led to the seal. That book is missing, and someone within this household facilitated its removal. The family. Precisely. We stood then, side by side, looking out the window at the grounds below. The mystery had changed. It was no longer a question of theft. It was a question of who had found the truth and what they now intended to do with it. Holmes's voice was low, grim. "If they unlock that vault, Watson, if they open those tablets." He left the sentence unfinished. But he didn't need to. I understood. The past was no longer sleeping. It had begun to stir. The morning sun cast a pale light over the ancient oaks of Greystone's grounds, their branches skeletal against a sky heavy with the promise of rain. Inside the great hall, Holmes and I moved with an urgency tempered by the gravity of our discoveries. The Codex Ashburnhamensis, missing from the shelves before the rest of the collection vanished, was now the focal point of our investigation. Yet despite our fervor, a pervasive unease settled between us like a cold mist. Holmes sat once more at the great oak table in the library, the catalogues and estate ledgers strewn before him in disarray. His fingers traced the entries, searching for a pattern, a name, an omission that might betray the culprit. "Every movement," he murmured, "is deliberate. This is no mere theft, Watson. It is a chess match played in shadows. The pieces move with care." I nodded. "And the family?" As Holmes's gaze lifted sharply. "That is the question. I have met them all. Lady Agnes, the widow, her son, Lord Percival, the two daughters, Eleanor and Beatrice, and of course the enigmatic Ashburnham, though now." His voice trailed off. "I saw the servants as well," I added. "No one quite matches the rest. There's a tension in the air, whispers behind closed doors, furtive glances." "Precisely. And this is a house built on secrets as well as stone." He reached for the ledger that detailed the library's acquisitions, cross-referencing the catalog numbers with notes on provenance and condition. His eyes flickered with sudden excitement. Here, the Ashburnham was acquired nearly a century ago, brought from an obscure monastery in the Balkans. It had been in private hands since, considered dangerous, or at least unsettling. I leaned over to see the handwritten note. Contains fragmentary translations of archaic rites. To be handled with caution. Holmes grinned, a rare softness touching his features. Dangerous knowledge, exactly as Ashcombe said. Suddenly, a sharp knock sounded on the library door. Holmes's face darkened. Come in. The door opened to reveal Lady Agnes, her posture erect but her eyes shadowed with worry. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, she began, voice steady but urgent. There has been an incident. Holmes rose, his senses immediately alert. Speak plainly, Lady Agnes. It's Eleanor. She's missing. I felt the blood drain from my face. Missing? I echoed. Yes, she was last seen in the East Wing near the old nursery. But when the staff went to check, she was gone. No sign of struggle, no note. Holmes moved swiftly, gathering his coat and gloves. Watson, we must find her. We hurried through the dim corridors of Greystone, the vastness of the estate swallowing us whole. The East Wing was a relic of a forgotten era, chambers untouched since Lady Agnes's youth, dust motes dancing in shafts of light, faded tapestries whispering secrets of centuries past. In the nursery, the signs were subtle but unmistakable. A chair overturned, a fragment of lace snagged on a nail, footprints smudged in the dust leading toward the servants' passage. Holmes knelt, examining the prints. Too large for a child. She was taken, escorted. By whom? I asked. That is what we must discover. Returning to the library, Holmes summoned the family and key servants. The tension was palpable, a taut wire ready to snap. Lady Agnes was composed but pale. Lord Percival was restless, his jaw tight. Beatrice was silent, eyes cast downward. Holmes began his inquiries, peeling back layers of family history and rivalry. Old grievances, whispered betrayals, and hints of deaths, hidden beneath polite smiles, emerged like ghosts from the past. Lord Percival, Holmes addressed the eldest son. Where were you last night? At the manor's stables, attending to a sick horse, Percival replied, eyes flickering to the door. Beatrice? I was in my room reading, she said softly. And you, Lady Agnes? In my chambers, alone. Holmes's gaze sharpened. And Eleanor? Silence. Holmes turned to the servants, speaking gently but with unmistakable authority. Has anyone seen anything unusual? Visitors? Unfamiliar faces? A footman swallowed hard. No, sir, but there was a strange man seen near the East Wing after dusk, cloaked and hooded. As Holmes's eyes narrowed. Describe him. Tall, pale, he spoke little, but he carried a small box. Interesting, Holmes mused. As the questioning continued, the threads of intrigue began to knot tighter. The missing book, the secret vault, the ancient tablets, and now the disappearance of a family member, all connected by invisible strands. Later that evening, as the manor settled into uneasy quiet, Holmes and I stood once more before the sealed case containing the scriptum Alarici. Watson, he said, our time grows short. The family's patience will wane, and so will ours. I felt the weight of his words. What do you propose? We follow the trail. Begin with that strange visitor. He holds a piece of the puzzle. Holmes lifted his lantern, casting a steady glow on the map of Greystone's grounds spread across the table. There are hidden places still unexplored, passages uncharted, and in the shadows, answers await. I met his gaze, a mixture of determination and foreboding in both our eyes. Then let us not waste another moment. As the candle guttered and the night deepened, the air in Greystone Hall grew thick with secrets yet to be revealed, and dangers lurking just beyond the flickering light. The game was underway once more. Chapter 4, The Cloaked Stranger. The night outside Greystone Hall was black as a raven's wing, the wind a distant whisper threading through the ancient oaks that crowded the estate's borders. Within the manor, an uneasy silence had settled, a silence that seemed to press upon the very walls as if the house itself held its breath. Holmes and I had resolved to pursue the only lead available, the mysterious cloaked visitor glimpsed near the East Wing on the night of Eleanor's disappearance. Yet even with the map spread before us and the flickering lantern casting long shadows, the puzzle refused to yield its secrets easily. We must tread carefully, Holmes warned, folding the map with precision. This man, Whoever he is has knowledge of the vault and perhaps a hand in what has transpired here. I nodded, the weight of his words sinking deep. But where does one begin to look for a stranger who has vanished as silently as a shadow? Holmes's gaze sharpened. At the places where shadows linger longest. The servants' quarters offered little in the way of comfort or clarity. Dimly lit and smelling faintly of stale tobacco and unwashed linen, the cramped room seemed an unlikely refuge for secrets. Yet it was here, whispered among hushed voices and furtive glances, that we found the first thread. "An odd man came last night," muttered a jittery stable hand when Holmes questioned him in the flickering candlelight. Tall, cloaked, eyes like pale ice, he asked for directions to the east wing and spoke to no one but the housekeeper. "The housekeeper?" Holmes repeated. "Yes, ma'am, Miss Evelyn. She's old but sharp, sir. Saw the man once or twice, but never up close." Holmes gave a curt nod. "We must speak with her." We found Miss Evelyn in the kitchen, her hands deftly kneading dough. She looked up, eyes bright despite the late hour. I saw the strange visitor," she said in a voice thick with a Yorkshire brogue. "Came in just after dusk, all wrapped in black like the night itself. Said he was a scholar, interested in the estate's history." "A scholar?" I echoed, curious. Aye, but there was something off about him. He carried a small locked box and kept glancing over his shoulder like a man hunted. Holmes's eyes gleamed with interest. "Did he say where he was from?" "No, just that he sought knowledge long buried." Holmes exchanged a glance with me. "Watson, this man is no mere collector. He is a seeker of secrets and likely a danger to us all." Our next destination was the East Wing itself, a place I had previously seen only in fleeting glimpses, a shadowed maze of forgotten rooms and shuttered windows. Now, under the cloak of darkness and armed with lanterns, Holmes and I explored its depths. The corridors were lined with faded portraits whose eyes seemed to follow us, and carpets moth-eaten but thick with dust. A faint mustiness filled the air, mingled with the faintest scent of lavender and old paper. As we crept forward, Holmes paused before a heavy door, its wood cracked and warped by time. "This, Watson," he whispered, "is the old nursery, the last place Eleanor was seen." The lock was broken, and with a gentle push, the door creaked open to reveal a room frozen in time, small toys scattered on the floor, a crib long empty, and a window looking out onto the moonlit gardens. Holmes's gaze swept the floor. "Look here." There, barely visible in the dust, were the marks of footprints, small, hurried, leading toward a narrow servants' passage hidden behind a tapestry. "This corridor," Holmes mused, "may be the route taken by Eleanor's captors." Without hesitation, we slipped behind the tapestry and found ourselves in a claustrophobic stone passage that wound downward. The air grew colder and heavier with each step. The walls closed in until it felt as though the very earth was pressing upon us. The flickering lanterns cast monstrous shadows that seemed to dance with malevolence. Suddenly a faint sound echoed, a whisper, or perhaps the shifting of ancient stone. Holmes halted, listening intently. "We are not alone, Watson." I drew my revolver tighter, heart pounding. "Show yourself!" Holmes called into the darkness. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, from the gloom ahead, a figure emerged, a man cloaked in black, hood drawn low. His pale eyes caught the lantern light, cold and calculating. "You are persistent," he said, voice smooth as silk but edged with steel. Holmes stepped forward without hesitation. "And you are the man who stalks these halls." The stranger inclined his head slightly, a faint, sardonic smile playing about his lips. "I seek what has been hidden, Mr. Holmes. The vault, the tablets, the knowledge your friend Ashcombe tried to bury." Holmes's jaw clenched. "You endanger much more than you realize." The man's smile faded. "I care for none of that. I want only the truth and the power it promises." I watched as Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Then you are a fool." "Perhaps," the stranger said softly, "but even fools can unravel destinies." Before Holmes could reply, the man reached into his cloak and vanished down a narrow side passage, swift as a shadow fleeing dawn. Holmes and I exchanged a glance, then gave chase. The passage twisted, opened into a cavernous chamber lined with strange carvings, similar in style to the vault's walls, but older, more eroded. Symbols writhed like living things in the lantern glow. The stranger stood before a stone dais where rested a small ancient box, likely the same Miss Evelyn had seen. Holmes stepped forward, voice ringing clear. "Put down the box." The stranger turned, eyes flashing dangerously. "You cannot stop what has begun." With that, he pressed a hidden panel on the dais. The floor trembled, and a section of the wall slid aside, revealing a spiral staircase descending into blackness. Holmes's voice was grim. "To the depths once more." We paused at the foot of the stairs, the air thick with dust and history. "This, Watson, is the threshold of the true mystery," Holmes said, his tone low. "And Eleanor?" Holmes's eyes darkened. "Still a pawn in a game far older than we imagined." The spiral staircase beckoned like a mouth waiting to swallow us whole. "We proceed," Holmes said. And so, beneath the very foundation of Greystone Hall, we stepped into the darkness, into a labyrinth of shadows, secrets, and dangers beyond reckoning. The spiral staircase wound endlessly downward, each step groaning beneath our careful tread as if protesting the disturbance after so many silent centuries. The cold seeped deeper into my bones, not merely from the chill of the earth, but from an oppressive weight that seemed to press on the very soul. The air grew heavy, laden with the scent of damp stone, stale air, and something far older, something like decay. But not quite. Holmes's lantern cast wavering light against the rough-hewn walls, revealing glimpses of ancient runes and strange pictographs, half erased by the passage of time, yet still resolute in their silent witness. I studied them closely, tracing the shapes with my eyes, angular lines intertwined with curving flourishes, images of creatures I could not name, and symbols that defied classification. "This script," Holmes murmured, "resembles the tablets above, but here it is fragmented, as if carved in haste or under duress." We reached the bottom of the stairs and stepped into a vast subterranean chamber. The ceiling soared high above, lost in darkness, while pillars of rough stone lined the space like sentinels. The floor was uneven, paved with ancient flagstones cracked and worn. At its center stood an altar of black granite, worn smooth by untold generations. Upon the altar lay the small box the stranger had so desperately protected. Holmes approached it cautiously, his eyes narrowed with suspicion and fascination. "Notice," he said, "the carvings on the box itself, tiny symbols, much like those on the tablets, but also resembling those in the Ashburnham. He reached out, but stopped short of touching the box. "We must be careful. Such artifacts often bear traps, mechanical, magical, or both." As if in response, the chamber seemed to grow colder still. I heard a faint hum, a vibration almost imperceptible but growing steadily in intensity. The lantern's flame flickered wildly, casting frantic shadows across the walls. Holmes took a small set of tools from his pocket, a slender probe, a delicate mirror, and began examining the box's seams and locks. "Curious," he said. "This lock is not mechanical. It responds to pressure, or perhaps intent." "What does that mean?" I asked. "That only one with the proper knowledge or resolve can open it." I glanced about the chamber. "And the runes?" Holmes's gaze followed mine. Warnings. Protective wards, no doubt, designed to keep this place and its secrets sealed. Minutes passed like hours as Holmes worked, every movement deliberate and precise. Finally, with a soft click, the lock gave way. Holmes lifted the lid carefully. Inside was a single parchment, brittle with age. Holmes unfurled it with reverence, and the flickering lantern light revealed an intricate map, covered with handwritten annotations in Latin and a strange script I did not recognize. "This," Holmes breathed, "is no ordinary map. It is a guide, possibly to the very heart of the vault." I peered over his shoulder. But to what? A treasure? A secret? Holmes's eyes gleamed with something I had rarely seen before, something bordering on reverence and dread. To a secret buried not just beneath Greystone, but beneath history itself. Suddenly, the faint hum became a low roar, and the ground beneath our feet trembled. Dust rained from the vaulted ceiling. "We must leave," Holmes said urgently. "Something is awakening." We turned to retrace our steps, but as we ascended, the staircase behind us began to collapse, the ancient stones crumbling into a churning cloud of rubble. The passage sealed shut as if by some unseen hand. Trapped in the bowels of Greystone, our lanterns flickering against the encroaching dark, we faced a peril far greater than a missing library or a stolen book. We faced the slow, grinding awakening of an ancient power. Holmes's voice cut through the darkness. "Watson, this is only the beginning. The secrets we seek come at a price." I steeled myself for what lay ahead, knowing that the night and the mystery had only just begun. The air grew colder still as we pressed onward into the labyrinthine heart of the vault, the lantern's glow barely piercing the oppressive gloom. The walls here were carved with deeper precision, the runes more elaborate, intricate spirals, serpentine creatures entwined with celestial symbols, and cryptic inscriptions in a language that danced on the edge of comprehension. Holmes traced the lines with a finger, his brows furrowed. "Watson," he whispered, "these markings tell a story, a legend entwined with the very foundations of Greystone Hall." I stepped closer, my breath misting in the frigid air. "What sort of legend?" Holmes's voice took on a solemn tone. "The tale of Alaric the Seer, a mystic who lived in these lands over 1,000 years ago. It is said he possessed knowledge that could unlock the hidden power beneath the earth, a power guarded jealously by secret orders and bloodlines sworn to silence." He tapped the wall gently. This vault was constructed not merely to protect books or relics, but to imprison that very power. The thought sent a chill deeper than the cold. I imagined ancient rites, whispered incantations, and the deadly cost of forbidden knowledge. Ahead, the passage opened into a vast chamber, lit by phosphorescent fungi clinging to the damp stone. The chamber's floor was a mosaic depicting the phases of the moon and the twisting paths of constellations. In the center, a stone pedestal bore an ornate box, larger and more elaborate than the one we had found below. Holmes approached it reverently. "This is no ordinary container. It likely holds the key to the next stage of the mystery, or perhaps the secret Eleanor was taken to uncover." I examined the mosaic carefully. The stars depicted were arranged not as they appeared now, but as they would have in the age of Alaric, centuries before modern astronomy. "Time itself is part of the puzzle," I remarked. "The vault defies the present." Holmes nodded. "And so must we." He reached out and lifted the lid, revealing a series of scrolls bound in aged leather, each sealed with a wax emblem bearing a sigil unfamiliar to me, a serpent devouring its own tail. "These scrolls," Holmes said, "contain the lost rites of Alaric, instructions for awakening what lies beneath. But they also speak of a curse. Any who seek the power for selfish gain will doom their bloodline." A sudden noise echoed from the far end of the chamber. A scraping, faint but unmistakable. Holmes's hand moved swiftly to his revolver. "We are not alone." I drew my own weapon, heart pounding. Shadows shifted against the walls, and from the darkness emerged a figure. Cloaked, hooded, but unmistakably the same pale-eyed stranger we had confronted earlier. "You delve too deep," he hissed, stepping forward, eyes burning with fanatic resolve. Holmes stood firm. "And you would stop us by force?" The stranger's lips curled in a grim smile. "Force is but a tool. The vault itself will be the judge of who is worthy." Before Holmes could react, the stranger raised an ancient dagger inscribed with glowing runes. The chamber trembled violently, dust and stone falling in a cascade. I lunged forward, knocking the dagger aside, but the stranger vanished into the darkness, leaving behind an eerie silence. Holmes's eyes gleamed in the lantern light. "The vault is alive, Watson. Its guardians, whether human or spirit, will not surrender its secrets easily." We stood amidst the ruins, knowing that every step deeper was a step closer to danger and to a truth that could shake the very foundations of history. As we ascended back towards the surface, the weight of what we'd uncovered settled heavily upon us. Eleanor's fate, the family's secrets, and the whispered legends of Greystone were now entwined in a dance of peril and revelation. Holmes's final words, as we emerged into the cool night air, were grave and resolute. "We must prepare for what comes next, Watson. For beneath Greystone, a storm is gathering, one that may consume us all." Chapter 5. Whispers Among the Ashburnhams. The dawn that broke over Greystone Hall was pale and hesitant, as if the sun itself dreaded what the day might bring. A heavy mist clung to the sprawling gardens, curling like ghostly fingers around the ancient stone statues and hedges trimmed into grotesque shapes. Inside the manor, the air was thick with unease, a palpable tension that hung like a storm cloud ready to burst. I found myself once again in the grand drawing room, its heavy velvet drapes drawn back to reveal the pale morning light filtering through stained glass. Lord Ashburnham sat by the hearth, his gaunt face etched with lines deeper than I had noticed before. His fingers tapped nervously against the arm of his chair, betraying a restlessness at odds with his usual stoic demeanor. "Watson," He greeted me, voice brittle yet urgent. You and Mr. Holmes have stirred a hornet's nest with your discoveries. I exchanged a glance with Holmes, who stood near the window, his expression unreadable. Lord Ashburnham, Holmes said quietly, the vault's secrets are not mere legends. They hold real power and real danger. Your family's history is entwined with it in ways you have yet to understand. The old lord's eyes flashed with a mixture of fear and defiance. I have guarded these secrets my entire life, hoping to keep them buried. But now I fear the past will not remain silent. At that moment, the heavy oak doors creaked open, and Lady Miriam Ashburnham entered. Her presence was commanding, the sharp lines of her face softened only slightly by a shadow of sorrow. You speak of secrets, father, she said, voice steady but cold. Yet it is secrets that have torn this family apart. Eleanor is missing, and none can say where she has gone or why. Holmes inclined his head in greeting. Lady Miriam, we believe Eleanor's disappearance is connected to the vault and the stranger we encountered. She took a step forward, eyes narrowing. Then this is no mere accident. Someone within these walls has betrayed us. A murmur stirred among those gathered, whispered accusations and wary glances exchanged in the silence. From the doorway emerged Charles Ashburnham, the younger brother, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by a grim resolve. Betrayal? He scoffed. Or desperation. We have long lived under the shadow of this family curse. Perhaps it is time to confront it. Holmes's gaze sharpened. And what would that entail, Mr. Ashburnham? Charles smiled thinly, opening old wounds, revealing truths best left hidden. The tension in the room thickened, the air crackling with unsaid words and ancient grudges. I caught Lady Miriam's eye, and she whispered, The vault's secrets are a double-edged sword. What is hidden beneath Greystone could save us or destroy us all. Holmes turned to me. Watson, we must delve deeper, not just into the vault, but into the family's tangled history. The key to Eleanor's fate lies buried there. As the morning light brightened, so too did the shadow of uncertainty that loomed over Greystone Hall. The past was awakening, and with it, the storm that would test loyalties, reveal betrayals, and challenge everything we believed. The heavy stillness in the drawing room seemed to press down upon us all, as if the very walls had grown watchful, listening to every whispered accusation and silent thought. Lord Ashburnham sank deeper into his chair, fingers interlaced tightly, his weathered face a mask of solemn resignation. My family has borne this burden for centuries, he said at last, voice gravelly. The vault beneath Greystone is no mere curiosity. It is a legacy and a curse. It was built by our ancestors to protect something powerful, something dangerous. The knowledge contained within those walls could alter the course of nations. Lady Miriam paced slowly across the room, at the sharp click of her boots on the polished floor echoing ominously. And yet that knowledge has driven wedges between us. Eleanor was always the most curious, perhaps too curious for her own good. Holmes's eyes narrowed. Lady Miriam, do you believe someone in the family might have aided the stranger? She stopped and met Holmes's gaze directly. I do not know what to believe anymore, but if those books hold the key to the vault's secret, and if Eleanor disappeared trying to find answers, then the danger is very close, perhaps closer than we dare admit. Charles Ashburnham, leaning against the mantelpiece with a sardonic smile, interjected sharply, You speak as if our family is united, Lady Miriam. I see nothing but fractures, resentments long buried, greed simmering beneath polite smiles. Lord Ashburnham's eyes flickered with pain. Charles, you know well the sacrifices that have been made to keep our name and our secrets intact. The outside world must never learn of the vault or what lies beneath Greystone. Holmes's voice was calm but insistent. Secrets kept in shadow often breed the greatest peril. If Eleanor uncovered something, or if she was taken for what she knew, then every moment counts. The room fell silent again, each of us wrestling with the implications. Suddenly, from the far corner, a young woman stepped forward. Clara, the Ashburnhams' distant cousin and the estate's historian. She was quiet and unassuming, but held a steely resolve beneath her modest exterior. I have been reviewing some of the family records, Clara said softly. There are mentions of a hidden chamber beneath the vault, an even older structure predating Alaric's time. It is said to hold relics from the founding bloodline. If Eleanor found a reference to it, she may be deeper underground than any of us suspect. Holmes's interest was immediate. An older structure? A vault beneath the vault? Clara nodded. Yes, it has been erased from many records, but faint traces remain in the margins of old letters and maps. It was sealed after a calamity. What sort of calamity? I asked. The Ashburnhams have long whispered of a catastrophe, the downfall of the original line due to betrayal and greed. The sealed chamber was meant to hold the consequences of that event. An artifact, perhaps, or knowledge so dangerous it had to be locked away. Lady Miriam's expression darkened. That explains the family's obsession and fear. If Eleanor stumbled upon even a hint of that, she was risking everything. Holmes paced slowly, connecting threads in his mind. The stranger's knowledge, the secret passages, the curse, all centered on this layered history. Whoever controls that chamber controls the fate of the Ashburnhams and possibly far beyond. Charles laughed bitterly. Then it seems we are all pawns in a game played centuries ago. Lord Ashburnham's voice dropped to a whisper. Not just pawns, heirs, and heirs can become kings or ruin themselves in pursuit of power. The room grew colder, as though the very past had seeped into the present, chilling the air with its weight. Holmes turned to me. Watson, we must gain access to these older records Clara mentioned. They may hold the key to finding Eleanor and unraveling the vault's deepest mysteries. I will assist you, Clara said firmly. The estate's archive is vast and labyrinthine, but some documents remain hidden, known only to a few. As we arranged plans to search the archive, the heavy oak doors creaked open again. This time, it was the butler, Edmund, his face grave. Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, there is a visitor at the gate, a man requesting an audience. He refuses to identify himself, but claims urgent business regarding the Ashburnham estate. Holmes's eyes glittered. Prepare to receive him. This day brings no end to surprises. Later, as the sun sank behind the western hills, casting long shadows across the manor's ancient stones, I found myself walking the gardens with Lady Miriam. The cool evening air did little to ease the tension in her eyes. Eleanor has always been more than just a daughter to this family, she confided. She was a beacon of hope, a chance to break free from the darkness that clings to us. I asked gently, do you believe the vault's secrets can be a blessing, or will they only bring ruin? She paused, gazing into the gathering dusk. I fear the answers may lie somewhere in between. Power is a double-edged sword. It can protect or destroy. It depends who wields it. Her words lingered in my mind as the manor settled into uneasy silence. Beneath our feet, the vault, and the older chamber beyond it, awaited discovery. Somewhere in that darkness, Eleanor was trapped between history and mystery, and time was running out. The great oak doors of the estate's archive swung open with a slow groan, revealing rows upon rows of towering shelves crammed with ancient tomes, brittle manuscripts, and leather-bound folios whose spines had long since cracked under the weight of centuries. The air was thick with the musk of aged paper, dust motes dancing in the shafts of afternoon sunlight filtering through leaded glass windows. Clara Ashburnham moved confidently between the shelves, her slender fingers tracing the titles as if recognizing old friends. Holmes and I followed closely, our footsteps muffled by the thick Persian rug that ran the length of the room. This archive, Clara explained softly, holds more than just the family records. Many documents were concealed here during the last century's unrest. Letters, journals, maps, even personal diaries that have never been cataloged properly. I believe some contain references to the older vault and the calamity that sealed it. Holmes's eyes gleamed with keen interest. A treasure trove indeed. Miss Ashburnham, your assistance may prove invaluable. Clara offered a faint smile. I have spent years studying what is accessible, but much remains hidden, deliberately so. Our ancestors were meticulous in safeguarding their secrets. She led us to a secluded alcove where an ancient wooden chest rested beneath a faded tapestry depicting the Ashburnham coat of arms, a serpent entwined with a crescent moon. Within this chest are private papers, Clara said, undoing the heavy iron clasp. Documents intended only for the eyes of the family head, or those trusted implicitly. Holmes leaned over the chest, lifting out a bundle of parchments tied with a red ribbon, yellowed and brittle with age. This, he said, may be our best chance to uncover the truth behind the sealed chamber. As he carefully unfolded the first sheet, I noticed the delicate script, a mixture of Latin and an older runic alphabet. Holmes's eyes flicked rapidly between the two, deciphering with the practiced ease of a seasoned scholar. "This is a letter from Lord Edwin Ashburnham, written shortly before his mysterious disappearance nearly 2 centuries ago," Holmes said. "It details his concerns over the vault's secrets and mentions a hidden sanctum beneath the estate." Clara nodded gravely. Edwin was the last head of the family to enter the oldest vault. His disappearance remains an unsolved mystery. Many believe he was lost to the very secret he sought to protect. Holmes continued reading, his voice lowering with growing fascination. He speaks of a cursed relic, an artifact so potent that its very existence could unravel the Ashburnham bloodline. He warns that any who seek it without true purpose risk damnation. I shivered despite the room's warmth. This curse, it feels all too real. Suddenly, a soft knock echoed at the archive's door. Clara exchanged a glance with Holmes before stepping forward. "Enter." The door creaked open to reveal Edmund, the butler, looking unusually unsettled. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson," he began. "The visitor at the gate is growing impatient. He insists his business is urgent and that he must see the head of the family immediately." Holmes set the letter down with a measured calm. "Very well. Lead him in." Moments later, a tall man stepped into the dim light, his presence commanding yet enigmatic. His sharp features were shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and his coat bore the dust of travel. "I am called Carlyle," he announced, voice smooth but carrying an edge of steel. "I come bearing news that concerns the Ashburnham legacy and your missing daughter." Lady Miriam, who had entered quietly behind Edmund, took a step forward, her expression hardening. "Speak plainly, sir. What news do you bring?" Carlyle removed his hat, revealing a shock of silver hair and piercing gray eyes that seemed to weigh us all. "The vault is not merely a tomb for secrets," he said. "It is a key, and others seek that key. Your daughter's disappearance has set forces in motion you cannot yet comprehend." Holmes's gaze sharpened. "Who seeks the vault's power?" Carlyle's eyes flicked to the heavy tapestry on the wall, the serpent emblem seeming to writhe in the flickering lamplight. "Foreign interests, ancient orders, and those who would exploit the curse for their own ends. You are caught in a web that spans continents and centuries." Lady Miriam's breath caught. "And Eleanor?" "She is alive," Carlyle said gravely. "But her time grows short. The vault's secrets are awakening, and so too are the dangers." The room seemed to close in around us, the weight of his words pressing like a vice. Holmes stepped forward. "You must tell us all you know, Carlyle. There is no time for half-truths." Carlyle nodded, settling into a nearby chair. "Very well. But first, you must understand the full scope of what you face." Eleanor Ashburnham's eyes fluttered open to darkness so complete it seemed to swallow even her thoughts. The cold was immediate, biting through layers of cloth and bone, and the faint echo of dripping water was the only sound that greeted her. She struggled to sit, muscles protesting. Her head throbbed, a dull ache that blurred memory and reality. Where was she? How long had she been here? Slowly, the flicker of a torch appeared at the edge of her vision. A shadowy figure approached, carrying a small lamp that cast weak, dancing light. "Eleanor," a familiar voice whispered. She blinked, recognizing the face, Clara's. Relief surged through her, mingled with a piercing fear. "Clara?" she whispered hoarsely. "How did you find me?" Clara smiled faintly, though her eyes held worry. "I followed the clues you left behind. The hidden passage, the coded notes in the Ashburnhamensis. It all led here." Eleanor's gaze drifted to the stone walls, carved with the same ancient runes she had seen in her father's study. "Holmes was right," she murmured. "The vault is more than a library." Clara stepped closer, her voice barely audible. "There's little time. The stranger we saw above, he's part of a faction that wants the relic for themselves. They believe the artifact can grant unimaginable power." Eleanor's heart pounded. "Then I was foolish to come here alone. The vault's curse? It's real." Clara reached out, clasping Eleanor's hand firmly. "Together, we'll uncover the truth and find a way out. But we must be careful. Every step deeper brings us closer to danger." A distant rumble shook the chamber, dust trickling from the ceiling. Eleanor swallowed hard. The vault is waking. Back in the archive, Holmes was piecing together fragments of the past with Carlyle's revelations. The fate of the Ashburnham family and the power hidden beneath Greystone was no mere legend, but a living, breathing threat, one that could consume them all. "Watson," Holmes said quietly, "we must prepare. The mysteries we unravel here will soon demand everything we have." I nodded, the chill of uncertainty settling over me like a second skin. The ancient serpent on the tapestry seemed to watch us, a silent reminder that some secrets refuse to remain buried. Carlyle's eyes settled on the heavy tapestry as though seeking courage from the serpent it bore. His voice lowered, steady but carrying the weight of grim knowledge. The Ashburnham vault is no ordinary family relic. It is a locus, a place where ancient powers converge. The artifact within is said to contain knowledge, or perhaps an energy so potent that kingdoms have risen and fallen in pursuit of it. Lady Miriam's face paled. "And you say Eleanor's disappearance is tied to this artifact?" "I do," Carlyle affirmed. "The man you saw, the stranger, was a harbinger for those outside your family who covet what lies beneath Greystone. They believe possession of this secret will grant them dominion beyond reason." Holmes folded his arms, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "A foreign buyer, perhaps? Someone with deep pockets and darker intentions." Carlyle nodded grimly. "Precisely. The Ashburnham family's internal strife is but a veil to mask the greater war for power that rages in the shadows." Charles Ashburnham, who had until now lingered in silence near the mantel, stepped forward, his voice cold. "So, we are not only dealing with our own demons, but also outsiders with no regard for kinship or honor." "Indeed," Carlyle said, "and time is short. The vault's defenses are awakening, and with them, dangers you cannot yet imagine." Holmes glanced toward the ancient maps Clara had spread upon a side table. "Clara, these references to the older vault, do they indicate where this artifact is hidden?" Clara's fingers hovered over a faded sketch of the estate's foundations. "There's a symbol here, an Ouroboros, the serpent devouring its tail, etched into the stone beneath the northern wing. According to the documents, it marks the entrance to the sealed chamber." I peered over her shoulder, noting the intricacy of the design. A symbol of eternity, but also of cycles and hidden knowledge. "Exactly," Holmes said. "And the serpent on that tapestry isn't merely decorative. It is a key, a warning, or perhaps both." Lady Miriam clasped her hands tightly. If the entrance lies beneath the northern wing, it could explain why Eleanor was drawn there. Carlyle's gaze hardened. "The moment you begin seeking the chamber, you put yourself in danger. The forces outside and perhaps inside your family will not hesitate to strike." Holmes nodded thoughtfully. "Then we must act quickly and with caution to rescue Eleanor and secure the artifact before it falls into the wrong hands." The tension in the drawing room thickened as plans were made. Holmes and I prepared to descend once more into the labyrinth beneath Greystone. Clara volunteered to assist with deciphering the runes and symbols, while Carlyle promised to uncover any external threats. Yet beneath the surface of cooperation, subtle fissures appeared. Charles, restless and sharp-tongued, challenged every decision. "We are delving into things better left alone," he warned darkly. "Some secrets exist to protect us from ourselves." Lady Miriam's eyes flashed, "And some secrets exist because they must be kept. But Eleanor's disappearance demands action, no matter the cost." Charles shot a glance at his sister. "Be careful, Miriam. Not all family betray in shadows. Some wield blades in daylight." The room fell into uneasy silence, the weight of unspoken accusations hanging heavy. As dusk fell over the estate, Holmes and I gathered our gear. The narrow corridors and spiral staircases leading beneath the northern wing awaited, their stones cold and unyielding. Before we left, Clara pressed a small bundle into Holmes's hands, a collection of cryptic notes and a hand-drawn map highlighting the serpent symbol. "Take these," she urged softly. "They may guide you through the traps and wards." Holmes accepted them with a nod. Every detail counts. The descent was slower this time, every step measured, every shadow scrutinized. The air grew cooler, tinged with the faint scent of damp earth and ancient stone. The labyrinth sprawled beneath us like a living thing, twisting passages and forgotten chambers unfolding in the flicker of our lanterns. At times, the walls seemed to whisper, faint echoes of a past long buried. Suddenly, Holmes paused, raising a hand. "Listen." A faint scrape, almost imperceptible, echoed from a narrow passage ahead. The sound was too rhythmic, too deliberate. "Someone else is down here," Holmes whispered. We moved forward cautiously, the passage narrowing until it opened into a vaulted chamber adorned with inscriptions. Before we could investigate further, a sudden flash of movement caught my eye, a figure darting into a shadowed alcove. "Stop!" Holmes commanded, but the figure vanished. In the silence that followed, a chilling draft swept through the chamber, and the walls seemed to hum with unseen energy. Holmes examined the inscriptions carefully. These runes speak of guardians and curses, protections for the sealed sanctum. Any intruder will face peril beyond imagining. I swallowed hard. And yet, someone has ventured here before us. Holmes's gaze hardened. Someone with knowledge of the vault's true nature, and not all are allies. The path forward lay beneath a stone marked with the Ouroboros, and Holmes set to work deciphering the mechanism. "Prepare yourself, Watson," he said. "The next step may not be for the faint of heart." As the stone shifted, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling deeper into darkness, I felt the weight of history and danger pressing down on us both. Back above, the manor was restless. Lady Miriam paced the hall, her face pale, eyes flicking to every shadow. Edmund moved silently, bringing messages and updates, his usual composure strained. Charles lingered near the window, staring into the night, lips moving in quiet mutterings. Prayers or curses, none could tell. Clara remained in the archive, poring over manuscripts, seeking any fragment of guidance to aid our descent. And somewhere beneath Greystone Hall, Eleanor and Clara faced their own peril, trapped between the ancient power awakening in the vault and the deadly ambitions closing in. As Holmes and I began the spiral descent, the air grew colder still, the silence more profound. The faint sound of dripping water echoed like a heartbeat in the abyss. I could not help but wonder, what awaited us in the depths? A treasure? A curse? Or something far worse? Only the Serpent knew. Chapter 6, Descent into Shadows. The stone staircase spiraled downward in a seemingly endless helix, each step worn smooth by countless feet over the course of centuries. The faint flicker of our lanterns cast long, quivering shadows against the cold, damp walls, illuminating ancient carvings and cryptic symbols that seemed to writhe and shift in the peripheral vision. The air grew steadily colder and heavier as we descended, thick with the scent of earth and forgotten time. Holmes moved with deliberate precision, his eyes scanning every detail of the passage, his fingers lightly brushing against the etched stones as though coaxing secrets from their silent surface. Behind him, I followed closely, heart pounding in a mixture of apprehension and resolve. We had crossed a threshold from which there was no easy return. "The runes here," Holmes murmured. "They are layered, an ancient form of protective magic combined with architectural ingenuity. The Ashburnhams were no ordinary family. Their ancestors sought to guard more than gold or jewels. They safeguarded knowledge powerful enough to topple empires." I glanced around, my gaze lingering on a peculiar carving, a serpent entwined around a crescent moon, its eyes inlaid with tiny garnets that seemed to glimmer faintly in the lamplight. "That serpent again," I whispered. "The family emblem, yes, but it feels alive here, as if it watches." Holmes nodded thoughtfully. "Symbols like these serve multiple purposes. They warn, they conceal, and sometimes they mislead. We must proceed with utmost caution." The stairwell opened into a vast, vaulted chamber. The walls were lined with alcoves, each housing statues and relics draped in dust and cobwebs. The vaulted ceiling stretched upward into darkness, adorned with faded frescoes depicting scenes of battles, celestial bodies, and cryptic rituals. In the center of the chamber stood a massive stone pedestal, upon which rested a heavy, iron-bound tome. The book's cover was embossed with the Ouroboros, the serpent devouring its own tail, a motif repeated throughout the vault. Holmes approached reverently, eyes alight with scholarly fervor. This must be the Ashburnham Codex, a grimoire of family history, secrets, and perhaps the key to the sealed sanctum. Carefully, he opened the tome. The pages were brittle, ink faded, but the handwriting was meticulous. Holmes began to read aloud, his voice steady despite the gravity of the text. "In the year of the red comet, when the moon wanes thrice in a single fortnight, the serpent's cycle renews. The guardian shall awaken, and those who seek the relic must prove their worth through the trials of blood and mind." I shivered involuntarily. The words were heavy with portent, as if echoing from a time when myth and reality were intertwined. Holmes continued, "The trials of blood and mind. This vault is not merely a repository. It is a crucible." Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the chamber. Dust rained down from the frescoed ceiling. The air shifted, electric and charged. "Watson," Holmes said, closing the book, "we are not alone." Above ground, the manor was steeped in restless anticipation. Lady Miriam stood before a tall window overlooking the estate's sprawling grounds, the moonlight casting a pale glow upon her anxious features. In her hand, she clutched an ancient locket, a family heirloom rumored to contain a secret compartment. Edmund, the ever-loyal butler, approached quietly. "My lady, the visitor you wish to see has arrived again. He insists on speaking with you directly." Lady Miriam nodded, her expression hardening. "Send him in." The visitor stepped through the threshold, a man of striking presence, his sharp eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. Carlyle. "I bring news," he said gravely. "There are forces gathering beyond these walls, dark and relentless. Your family's secret is no longer confined to this estate. The price of its discovery will be steep." Miriam's voice was steady, though the flicker of fear betrayed her. "What must we do?" Carlyle leaned in, his tone conspiratorial. "Trust no one blindly. Allies may be foes, and the vault's trials have begun." Far beneath the earth, Eleanor Ashburnham and Clara navigated the twisting tunnels of the older vault. The ancient runes carved into the walls seemed to pulse faintly, casting eerie reflections from their torchlight. "Do you think Holmes and Watson are coming for us?" Eleanor asked, voice barely above a whisper. Clara hesitated. "I hope so. But these passages, they shift as if alive. We must be cautious." A sudden draft extinguished their torches, plunging them into complete darkness. "Stay close," Eleanor hissed, fumbling for her matches. As the flames sputtered back to life, a narrow passageway opened before them, a corridor lined with strange glyphs, none of which appeared in any of the family's known records. "This is the heart of the older vault," Clara whispered. "The place the ancient texts warn about." Eleanor swallowed hard. "And perhaps the resting place of the artifact." Behind them, the faintest sound, footsteps, whispering voices, echoed through the labyrinth. Back below the northern wing, Holmes paused beside the pedestal, running his fingers along a carved inscription at its base. The symbols corresponded with those in the codex, and the markings on the Serpent tapestry. He glanced at me. "Watson, these markings are a cipher, a complex code blending ancient languages and esoteric symbols. Deciphering it will reveal the pathway to the sealed sanctum." I nodded, though a weight settled in my chest. Holmes continued, "Every moment we delay allows the forces seeking the artifact to close in. Our only hope lies in outpacing them, unraveling the cryptic warnings and reaching Eleanor before it is too late." The sound of distant footsteps approached, steady and deliberate. Holmes snapped the codex shut. "Prepare yourself, Watson. The game grows deadly." The footsteps grew louder, echoing off the vaulted chamber's stone walls, reverberating like a sinister drumbeat in the stillness. Holmes's eyes darted toward the shadowed entrance to the corridor beyond, his every muscle taut with anticipation. I tightened my grip on my lantern, the faint light trembling as the air thickened with unseen menace. "Someone or something approaches," Holmes whispered, voice barely audible over the encroaching silence. "We must be prepared for confrontation." The chamber seemed to contract, the flickering shadows twisting into unnatural shapes. I scanned every corner, every niche, searching for the source of the sound. Through the gloom, two figures emerged, cloaked and masked, their movements swift and purposeful. A palpable chill seeped into the air, the scent of cold metal and earth filling my nostrils. Holmes stepped forward calmly, though the glint in his eye betrayed a keen readiness. "State your business," he called out, voice ringing with authority that seemed to push back the darkness. One of the figures halted, a low, guttural voice issuing from behind the mask. "You tread on forbidden ground, Mr. Holmes. The Ashburnham vault is not for your kind. Leave or face consequences most dire." Holmes smiled thinly, unfazed. "I seek only to uncover truth and protect the innocent. Threats will not sway me." The second figure advanced, revealing a faint glimmer of a dagger. "You speak boldly. Few would dare." Before Holmes could respond, the dagger flashed in the dim light, aimed for his side. I lunged, grabbing the attacker's wrist, wrestling the blade downward. A struggle ensued, swift, brutal, and desperate, in which Holmes deftly incapacitated our assailants with practiced skill. Their heavy cloaks fell away, revealing faces pale and marked with strange sigils. Holmes examined the markings with a frown. These are symbols of the cult of the Serpent's Eye, a secret society rumored to guard or exploit the Ashburnham secrets. Their involvement confirms our worst fears. I glanced at the unconscious men, breathing heavily. Why would they risk direct confrontation? Surely stealth and secrecy are their allies. Holmes's gaze darkened. They are desperate, perhaps sensing their window closing or their plans unraveling. It bodes ill for Eleanor. We bound the men's hands and feet, securing them to the pedestal. Holmes carefully inspected their garments, extracting a folded parchment sealed with wax. Breaking the seal, he read aloud, "The time of reckoning approaches. The relic shall be ours, and the Ashburnham bloodline will be no more. The vault's trials will consume those unworthy. Prepare for the final awakening." "Their resolve is fanatical," Holmes observed grimly. "But fanatics are vulnerable to logic and resolve." I nodded. "And we have neither to waste." Holmes returned to the codex, poring over the passages that might elucidate the nature of these trials. His finger traced a sequence of symbols resembling the serpent Ouroboros intertwined with a labyrinth. "This," he said, "is the key. The trials will test intellect, courage, and lineage. Only one with Ashburnham blood and keen mind may proceed unharmed." The implication settled heavily on my shoulders. We could not merely rely on Holmes' brilliance. The bloodline itself was crucial. Eleanor's absence became more ominous. Meanwhile, far from the shadowed vault, Eleanor and Clara pressed deeper into the maze of corridors. The air grew thick with a cold, damp silence, punctuated by the distant drip of water and the occasional scuttle of unseen creatures. Their torches cast eerie flickers against walls lined with carvings depicting serpents coiling around ancient tomes and celestial bodies. "I fear the walls themselves shift," Eleanor whispered, voice trembling. "We are trapped in a living puzzle." Clara shivered but offered a reassuring smile. "The codex mentioned a labyrinth that protects the artifact. If we can solve it, we may find a way out, or at least the secret we seek." Their progress was halted abruptly by a sudden rumble. The floor beneath them shifted as a stone slab slid aside, revealing a hidden pit yawning below. "Careful!" Clara cried, grabbing Eleanor's arm. Together, they circled the pit, eyes scanning for a bridge or passage. To their relief, a narrow ledge extended around the perimeter, leading to a stairway carved into the rock. Steeling themselves, they proceeded cautiously, the darkness pressing in from all sides. At the stair's base lay a chamber dominated by a massive iron chest, bound with heavy chains and bearing the same serpent emblem. Eleanor's heart raced. This must be it, the resting place of the artifact. Clara knelt to examine the lock, covered in intricate runes. The codex hinted at a lock requiring both blood and wit to open, a riddle perhaps. Eleanor bit her lip, the weight of family legacy heavy upon her. If only Holmes and Watson were here. Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind them. They whirled to face shadowed figures emerging from the darkness. The cultists, relentless and merciless. "Your time is up," one hissed, brandishing a curved dagger. Clara drew a slender dagger from her belt. "We fight." The chamber erupted into chaos. Blades flashing, torches sputtering, desperate struggle beneath the vault's oppressive weight. Above ground, the manor was no less fraught. Lady Miriam stood at the threshold of the grand hall, the locket clutched tightly in her hand. Her eyes searched the faces of those gathered. Charles, Edmund, Carlyle, each masked with their own fears and secrets. "Every moment without Eleanor deepens the peril," Miriam said, voice resolute. "We must unify, lest we lose everything." Charles scoffed, but the tension in his voice betrayed uncertainty. Unity? When blood runs thick with suspicion? Carlyle's gaze was icy. "We face a threat far beyond family quarrels. Let petty grievances fall away. For the sake of the Ashburnham legacy, we must act." Miriam nodded. "Then let us prepare for what is to come." Back in the vault, Holmes and I faced the enigma of the Serpent's labyrinth. He spread the parchment map Clara had given us over the pedestal, his finger tracing the twisting passages. "The key to the sealed sanctum lies here, at the heart of the labyrinth," he said. "But between us and that heart are puzzles designed to confound and deter. Each step must be calculated." The air grew colder still, the silence thick with menace. I felt a sudden shiver. not from cold, but from the sheer weight of the unknown pressing down. Holmes looked up, eyes bright with determination. "Watson, are you ready? The next phase will test every ounce of our resolve." I steeled myself. "Always, Holmes. Lead the way." The serpent's shadow lengthened as we stepped forward into darkness more profound than night. The labyrinth's cold stones closed around us like the walls of a crypt, an ancient pulse beating beneath the surface, as if the very earth itself resented our intrusion. Holmes moved forward with unerring confidence. Yet I noted the subtle tenseness in his posture. This was no ordinary investigation, and even the great detective felt the weight of the unknown pressing down upon us. The flickering lantern cast grotesque shadows that danced across the walls, contorting the carved serpents into something alive, watching, waiting. Every step echoed eerily, swallowed, and then returned by the vault's hollow depths, as though the space itself were a vast and somber organ chamber, resonating with secrets too profound to voice. At intervals, Holmes paused to examine peculiar markings, a series of interlocking glyphs, faintly glowing in places, which he rapidly compared to his notes from the Ashburnham Codex and Clara's manuscript. The complexity was staggering. Languages layered atop one another, ancient tongues mingled with coded cipher, and occult sigils hinting at both protection and warning. "These markings," Holmes murmured, tracing a looping Ouroboros entwined with a knotwork labyrinth, "are more than mere decoration. They are instructions, but also tests. Each glyph corresponds to a trial, a mental riddle or physical obstacle." I swallowed hard. The stakes became clearer. This vault was not simply a crypt, but a crucible designed to filter the worthy from the unworthy, to shield the artifact from all but those prepared to face its price. Our passage opened into a vast chamber, a cathedral of stone dimly lit by shafts of moonlight filtering through narrow grates far above. The ceiling arched high, frescoes long faded but still discernible, serpents coiled around stars, a celestial dance of shadow and light, evoking a forgotten mythos of eternal cycles and guarded knowledge. At the chamber's center, an immense stone dais bore an elaborate mosaic depicting the family crest, entwined with a serpent swallowing its tail, encircling a radiant sun. Holmes knelt to examine the mosaic. This is the nexus, the heart of the labyrinth and the key to the sanctum. He produced a slender tool, an ivory stylus tipped with silver, and began tracing along the mosaic's lines. As his fingers moved, the mosaic shifted subtly, stones sliding with a faint grinding noise, revealing a concealed compartment beneath. A chill breeze swept through the chamber, carrying whispers that seemed to brush against our ears, words half heard, fragments of ancient incantations, or perhaps echoes of the past. Holmes looked up, eyes sharp. "We must be cautious. This vault is alive with old magic and even older dangers." We peered into the revealed space, a narrow stairway carved deep into the bedrock, spiraling downward into utter darkness. "Down," Holmes said simply, "to the final trial." As we prepared to descend, a sudden tremor shook the chamber. Dust fell like snow, and a deep rumbling echoed through the vault's corridors. Somewhere far beneath Greystone Hall, the earth groaned and shifted, as if awakening from centuries of slumber. Holmes's jaw tightened. Time is against us. The vault reacts to our presence, and no doubt our enemies close behind. I glanced at him, feeling the full weight of our predicament. The cult of the Serpent's Eye was not just a vague threat. They moved with purpose and ruthlessness, and Eleanor's fate hung precariously in the balance. We stepped down into the darkness, our lanterns the only bulwark against the abyss. The air grew colder still, each breath a misty ghost, and the silence around us was profound, broken only by the steady cadence of our footsteps and the faint drip of water echoing from unseen recesses. Above the vault, the atmosphere within Greystone Hall was no less fraught. Lady Miriam stood by the great window overlooking the estate, the family locket in her hand now open to reveal a hidden inscription, an archaic riddle that had eluded her until this moment. Carlyle's voice was low but urgent beside her. This inscription aligns with the Codex's warnings. It speaks of a bloodline bound to the Serpent's cycle, the key to unlocking the artifact's power. Miriam's eyes narrowed. "Then we are more deeply entwined in this mystery than I feared. The danger is not only external, but internal." Edmund approached, bringing news from the outer grounds. Strange figures had been spotted near the estate's perimeter, shadowy watchers whose allegiance was unknown. Charles Ashburnham's face darkened as he paced the room. This family's legacy is a burden none can carry without peril. Eleanor's choices have led us here, and now we must face the consequences. Miriam turned to her brother. Resolve firm. We will protect what is ours. The truth beneath Greystone must be revealed, and we will not cower. Back in the depths, Holmes and I reached the bottom of the stair. The chamber below was vast, its walls lined with ancient alcoves holding relics and manuscripts, the air heavy with the scent of age and dust. At the chamber's heart stood an ornate iron door, its surface engraved with serpents coiled around stars and moons. In the center was a complex lock, an interlocking mechanism of rings and glyphs that seemed to shift and pulse with an otherworldly light. Holmes examined the door carefully. This is it, the sanctum's final barrier. To open it requires not just skill, but the key of blood and intellect the Codex described. He pulled from his coat a small vial containing a few drops of Eleanor's blood, obtained from a cloth Clara had secured. Carefully, he applied the blood to a carved indentation on the lock, which glowed faintly in response. Now, Holmes murmured, the mind must unravel the cipher. Hours passed as he worked, deciphering riddles encoded in the shifting rings, his brow furrowed with concentration. Finally, with a soft click, the door began to open, revealing a chamber bathed in a ghostly light. Within lay the artifact, a crystalline orb cradled in an intricately wrought pedestal, its surface swirling with shifting images of stars and serpents. The air thrummed with power. Yet even as we stepped forward, a distant scream echoed through the vault, chilling and desperate. Holmes' expression sharpened. Eleanor. The race against time was far from over. Chapter 7. The Whispering Shadows. The scream echoed through the labyrinth, a haunting wail that seemed to claw at the very stones themselves. Its source was distant but unmistakable, laden with fear, desperation, and a primal call for salvation. Holmes and I exchanged a swift glance, the weight of urgency settling heavily upon us. We could no longer linger. Every second now was a chisel stroke, carving fate. Without hesitation, we abandoned the sanctum's glowing orb and surged back toward the twisting corridors of the vault. The walls around us whispered faintly, voices lost to time murmuring warnings in languages half forgotten, as though the vault itself resented our intrusion. The serpents etched in stone appeared to writhe subtly beneath the flickering lamplight, their jeweled eyes glinting like embers in a dying fire. "Watson," Holmes said sharply, voice tense yet controlled. "The cries. Eleanor is in grave peril. The cultists' fanaticism drives them to extremes. We must be swift and precise." The passageways narrowed, then branched into a dizzying web of tunnels, the ancient stones slick with moisture and the chill of the earth's breath. Each step we took seemed to carry us deeper into the heart of a world untouched by time, a subterranean temple where shadows reigned supreme. Holmes paused suddenly, his gaze fixed on a faint glimmer beneath a pile of rubble, a slender silver chain, broken and tarnished. He bent to retrieve it, turning it over in his hand. "This belonged to Clara," he murmured. "They have her? She's close." My heart pounded. Clara's fate was entwined with Eleanor's. Their survival depended on our haste. We pressed onward, guided by faint sounds, the scrape of boots, whispered incantations, the scrape of metal on stone. The vault's breath grew heavier, a palpable tension suffusing the air. Suddenly, the corridor opened into a vast chamber illuminated by flickering torchlight, the walls adorned with intricate bas-reliefs depicting the Serpent's Eye cult in ritual. Hooded figures stood clustered around a stone altar, their faces obscured beneath shadowed cowl. In the center, Eleanor was bound to a carved dais, her expression resolute despite the evident exhaustion and bruises marking her skin. Clara knelt beside her, struggling against her captors. Holmes's eyes narrowed. They intend to complete the final ritual. If we delay, all is lost. I drew my revolver silently, signaling Holmes to flank left while I approached from the right. The cultists were numerous, but their confidence was brittle, shattered by our sudden presence. Holmes's voice rang out, clear and commanding. "Release them at once, or face justice." A sneer responded from the lead cultist, Meng, a tall man whose eyes burned with fanatic fire. "You meddle in matters beyond your ken, detective. The Ashburnham legacy belongs to us. We seek to wield the power the family has hidden for generations." Holmes stepped forward, unfazed. Power wielded by the unworthy is destruction. You know nothing of what you seek. The room erupted into chaos. Blades clashed, torches flared, and shouts pierced the cavernous space. I fired a warning shot, and several cultists faltered, giving Holmes the opening to engage with swift, precise strikes. Amid the turmoil, Eleanor and Clara broke free, stumbling toward us. Their eyes held a fierce determination born of survival and desperation. "Help me?" Eleanor gasped. "The artifact, it is more than a treasure. It is a key." Holmes nodded grimly. "We must secure it before they reclaim it." The fight pushed us toward a spiral staircase descending deeper still into the bowels of Greystone's ancient underworld. The vault seemed to pulse in time with our hurried steps, alive with secrets eager to consume the unwary. As we descended, the air grew thick with a heady mix of earth, dust, and something unnameably ancient, a primal energy woven into the very fabric of the place. Holmes stopped suddenly, raising a hand. "Listen." From the darkness below came a faint, rhythmic chanting, a chorus of voices melding in a language older than memory, filling the stone corridors with an eerie cadence. "The cult is not merely after the artifact," Holmes said quietly. "They seek to awaken something buried deep beneath the estate." The walls around us seemed to pulse faintly in response, shadows coalescing into forms both terrifying and magnificent. Visions of serpents entwined with stars, ancient gods forgotten by time, guardians of hidden knowledge and power. Eleanor clutched my arm. "They don't understand what they meddle with. The vault's protections are real, deadly. The trials are not just tests, they are warnings." Holmes nodded, eyes gleaming with resolve. "We must reach the heart before the cult can complete their ritual. Failure is unthinkable." The stairway opened into an immense cavern, vast beyond imagination, its ceiling lost to darkness. At its center, a subterranean lake mirrored the flickering torchlight, casting ghostly reflections across the ancient walls. On the far side, a colossal stone door loomed, covered in elaborate carvings, serpents, stars, moons, and inlaid with precious stones that glowed faintly in the gloom. "This," Holmes said, voice reverent, "is the final barrier. Beyond it lies the treasure, or the doom, depending on who claims it." As we approached, the cultists regrouped on the opposite shore, chanting growing louder, their voices weaving an unholy tapestry of power and menace. Holmes turned to me and Eleanor. "Prepare yourselves. What lies beyond will test every fiber of our being." The vault held its breath. The final trial was upon us. The cavern's air was thick and heavy, imbued with the scent of damp stone, ancient incense long burned away, and something far darker, an intangible menace lurking just beyond the veil of sight. Our torches cast uneasy shadows that flickered and quivered on the cavern walls, as if the serpents carved in stone stirred to life in the fading light. The water of the subterranean lake lay still, a black mirror reflecting the jagged ceiling lost in darkness, broken only by the occasional ripple where unseen creatures stirred. Holmes stood motionless, eyes narrowed as he studied the massive stone door ahead. Its surface was a tapestry of serpentine reliefs, stars encircling moons, intricate knotwork woven with symbols so ancient they defied comprehension. Jewels embedded in the door glowed faintly, pulsing with a rhythm like a heartbeat, as if the door itself were alive, sentient and wary of intruders. "This door," Holmes whispered, his voice barely above the sound of dripping water, "is not merely a barrier of stone. It is a guardian, an ancient sentinel forged by the Ashburnham ancestors to protect what lies beyond from all but the rightful heirs." Eleanor stepped forward, her gaze fierce despite the weariness etched into her face. "Then we must be worthy, for the sake of our family, and to prevent this power from falling into the cult's hands." Clara nodded grimly, scanning the surroundings. The cultists' chants grow louder. They believe their ritual will force the door open, but the Codex warns that such a breach will awaken more than just the artifact. Holmes turned sharply, voice low but urgent. "Their fanaticism blinds them to the consequences. We must act swiftly before they complete their unholy invocation." I felt a cold shudder course through me. The stakes had never been higher. The artifact was no mere prize. It was a key to something primordial, something buried deep beneath Greystone's foundations, a force that could reshape the world if unleashed. The cultists' chanting crescendoed into a thunderous roar, reverberating through the cavern and shaking loose dust from the ancient ceiling. Hooded figures gathered along the lake's far shore, their voices weaving a dark symphony that seemed to stir the very air. Faces hidden beneath shadowed cowl, their eyes glinted with zealotry and madness. Holmes crouched beside the pedestal that held the last of the Codex's pages, furiously scanning the cryptic notes. There is a ritual embedded here, a counter to their summoning, but it requires precision and sacrifices none of us are willing to make lightly. Eleanor's voice was steady despite her exhaustion. Then we must be the shield, the sword, and the mind. The vault's trials have forged us for this moment. Clara drew her dagger, its blade catching the torchlight with a sinister gleam. If we fall, the legacy ends in shadow. But if we prevail... Her words were cut short as the cultists surged forward, crossing the lake in swift, desperate sprints, brandishing weapons forged for death and desecration. The battle ignited like wildfire. Steel clanged against stone. The sharp crack of gunfire echoed in the cavern's hollow vastness. I found myself beside Holmes, our movements synchronized as we fought to hold the cultists at bay. Eleanor and Clara worked as one, defiant, relentless, cutting through the waves of enemies with a fury born of desperation and blood-bound loyalty. Holmes's voice rang clear above the din. Hold the line. Protect the door at all costs. Sweat and grime smeared our faces as the fight dragged on, each moment a relentless test of endurance and will. The cultists' fanaticism drove them forward, heedless of their losses. But we held firm, knowing the price of failure. Amid the chaos, the cavern itself seemed to awaken. The water of the subterranean lake rippled unnaturally, and a deep growl echoed from its depths, a sound ancient and terrible, like the groan of the earth itself. A shadow rose from the black water, a vast serpent coiling with scales that shimmered like starlight, eyes burning with an intelligence both alien and primeval. The creature's appearance silenced the combatants for a fleeting heartbeat, awe and terror gripping all. Holmes's gaze met mine, sharp and unflinching. The Serpent Guardian, the final protector of the Ashburnham secrets. We face not only men, but forces beyond mortal reckoning. The cultists screamed in frenzy, attempting to strike at the beast, but it lashed out with devastating power. Stones shattered, men were thrown like rag dolls, and the cavern filled with chaos anew. In the midst of the turmoil, Eleanor dashed to the stone door, her hands trembling as she traced the glowing symbols. The final cipher awaited her touch, a complex sequence that only the bloodline could decipher. Now, Eleanor, Holmes called, his voice a lifeline through the storm of violence. With a deep breath, she pressed her palm against the cool stone, murmuring the words inscribed in the codex, ancient syllables that echoed with an eerie resonance. The jewels embedded in the door flared with brilliant light, the serpent's eyes glowing like beacons. Slowly, agonizingly, the massive door began to part, revealing a chamber bathed in radiant, otherworldly luminance. Inside lay the artifact, a crystalline orb suspended in midair, its surface swirling with celestial patterns and serpentine forms. It pulsed with an energy that hummed in harmony with the cavern's heartbeat, promising knowledge and power, and peril beyond imagining. Holmes approached cautiously, eyes gleaming with a mixture of reverence and calculation. The culmination of centuries of secrecy and sacrifice, the Ashburnham legacy, now within our grasp. But even as he spoke, a low rumble vibrated through the chamber, and the shadows lengthened once more. From the depths of the sanctum's hidden vaults, an ominous presence stirred, ancient, vigilant, and hungry. Chapter 8. The Heart of the Serpent. The air in the chamber pulsed with a living energy, throbbing, vibrant, as if the very walls breathed in tandem with the orb's ethereal glow. It was a presence both magnificent and terrible, a beacon of knowledge and dread intertwined. I stood beside Holmes and Eleanor, my senses overwhelmed by the sheer weight of history and power converging in this subterranean sanctum. The crystalline orb floated suspended above a pedestal wrought from blackened stone veined with gold. Its surface shifted endlessly, a mesmerizing dance of stars, serpents, and cosmic patterns that seemed to reveal and conceal truths beyond mortal comprehension. The light it cast bathed the chamber in a spectral radiance, painting our faces with hues of sapphire and emerald. Holmes stepped forward, fingers poised but hesitant, as though touching this relic might unravel the fragile threads of reality. This artifact, he said softly, is not merely a key or a treasure. It is a nexus, a confluence of knowledge and power amassed by the Ashburnham line across generations. Eleanor's voice broke the silence, steady despite the exhaustion in her eyes. The Codex hinted at this, the heart of the Serpent, said to contain secrets of the past and maps to futures yet unwritten. I regarded the orb with a mix of awe and unease. Could such a thing truly hold the answers we sought, or was it a Pandora's box poised to unleash chaos upon the world? Holmes turned his gaze to the chamber's walls, now alive with inscriptions previously hidden in shadow. Ancient runes and star maps intertwined with serpentine motifs traced the lineage of the Ashburnham family, their guardianship intertwined with cosmic cycles beyond time's reach. The vault's creators were not merely collectors or scholars, Holmes mused. They were custodians of a deeper mystery, keepers of a celestial covenant tied to the very fabric of existence. Suddenly, a faint hum rose from the orb, growing steadily until the chamber seemed to vibrate in harmony. The patterns on the orb's surface shifted, revealing a new layer, a star chart annotated with cryptic symbols and lines connecting constellations I recognized from my own studies. Holmes's eyes lit up. A map, but not of this world alone. The Serpent's eye transcends our earthly realm. It is a guide to cosmic pathways, hidden realms, and perhaps gateways. Eleanor stepped closer, tracing a finger over one particular constellation, a serpent entwined around a radiant sun. This matches the symbol on the Ashburnham family crest. It's a celestial signature, a promise of protection or a warning. The orb pulsed again, and suddenly, images flooded the chamber. Visions not of the past, but possibilities. Glimpses of distant stars, forgotten temples swallowed by time, and shadowed figures moving through realms unseen. A chill passed through me. This was more than a family secret. It was a cosmic legacy, burdened with consequences none of us fully grasped. Before we could further examine the visions, a tremor shook the chamber. The door behind us slammed shut with a resounding finality, sealing us within the sanctum. The temperature dropped sharply. Our breath hung in the air like ghostly specters. Holmes's expression darkened. A final defense mechanism, no doubt. The vault will not surrender its secrets lightly. From the shadows beyond the orb, a figure emerged, cloaked not in the familiar garb of the cultists, but in a robe adorned with intricate serpentine embroidery, crowned with a circlet shaped like a coiled serpent devouring its tail. "I see you have found the heart," the figure intoned, voice resonant with cold authority. "But possession is only the beginning. The true trial lies ahead." The figure's eyes gleamed with unnatural light, a mixture of cunning and ancient knowledge that chilled me to the core. Holmes stepped forward, unbowed. "Who are you? Another guardian of this legacy?" The figure inclined their head slowly. "I am the Serpent's herald, bound to this place by blood and oath. My purpose is to test the worth of those who seek to claim the power within." Eleanor's grip tightened on my arm. "Then we accept your challenge, for our family, and to protect what must not fall into darkness." The herald smiled, a smile devoid of warmth, but laden with enigmatic promise. "Very well, let the final trial commence." The chamber shifted, the walls rippling as if alive, the star maps and serpentine glyphs merging into swirling patterns that engulfed us. The orb's light intensified, blinding and all-encompassing, until we were suspended in a realm beyond stone and time. Visions flashed before my eyes, visions of past Ashburnhams who had faced this very trial, their fates recorded in the swirling mists. Some emerged triumphant, wielding wisdom and power to protect their lineage. Others were consumed by greed, their souls lost to the void. Holmes's voice was steady in the storm of images. "This trial will test our minds, hearts, and spirits. Only through unity and understanding can we hope to prevail." Eleanor nodded, determination shining through the ephemeral haze. "Then we face it together." As the light swallowed us whole, I felt a profound connection, not only to those who came before, but to the vast cosmos itself, the heartbeat of the Serpent weaving through eternity. The true mystery of Greystone was no longer just about missing books or family secrets. It was about the fragile balance between knowledge and power, and the sacrifices required to maintain it. And so began the final journey into the heart of the Serpent. The light that enveloped us was no mere illumination, but a living presence, a swirling cosmos compressed into a single moment. I felt myself lifted from the solidity of the chamber, suspended between stars and shadows, as the orb's radiant energy wove itself through my very being. The air around us dissolved into a tapestry of shifting constellations and serpentine symbols, endless and infinite. Holmes's voice, calm and anchored, cut through the immensity. This is the crucible of the Ashburnham legacy, a trial not of strength or cunning alone, but of perception, spirit, and the harmony between man and the cosmos. Eleanor and Clara stood close, their faces pale but resolute. We were not alone in this astral realm. Phantasms of the past shimmered in the distance, ethereal forms of ancestors who had confronted this same trial. Some appeared serene, their eyes gleaming with knowledge, while others twisted in anguish, lost to the seductions of power and greed. As we ventured deeper into this spectral plane, a voice resonated, ancient and melodious, a serpent's whisper curling through the infinite void. Seek the truth within the stars, where serpents coil and secrets are barred. Only those who understand the dance may claim the light, escape the trance. The riddle echoed endlessly, a hypnotic cadence that teased the mind and urged us forward. Holmes's brow furrowed. A test of wisdom and insight. The celestial serpents represent cycles of knowledge and temptation. We must discern which path leads to enlightenment and which to ruin. The first challenge emerged as a constellation shifting before us, a great celestial serpent entwined around a radiant orb. Its eyes glowed with a penetrating intelligence, and it spoke, voice like a ripple through the cosmos. To pass, you must relinquish what you hold most dear. What weighs heaviest shall be your chain or your key. I glanced at Eleanor, who closed her eyes as if seeking within. Clara gripped her dagger tighter, but there was no fear, only a fierce determination. Holmes stepped forward. This trial demands sacrifice, but not of life, of burden. Each of us must confront our own chains, the ties that bind us to past regrets, guilt, or fears. The serpent's eyes locked onto me. I felt the chill of its gaze, as if it could peer into my soul. What do you hold most dear, and what are you willing to release? I thought of Mary, her gentle smile, the life I had once dreamed to build. But the demands of duty, the call to serve truth and justice, had cost me dearly. Could I shed the weight of my past, of loss and longing, to claim what lay ahead? With a steady breath, I stepped forward, reaching into the swirling light to place my burden before the serpent, a memory of failure, of moments lost and lives I could not save. As I did, the serpent's form shimmered, then dissolved into a trail of stars that winked like distant lanterns. Eleanor and Clara followed, each relinquishing their own chains, fears unspoken, secrets long buried. The air lightened, the path ahead opening like a blossom beneath the cosmic glow. Beyond the first trial lay the Hall of Reflections, a place where shadows were not cast by light, but by truth. We entered a vast chamber where mirrors lined the walls, mirrors that did not reflect our physical forms, but the innermost facets of our souls. Holmes's voice was steady but grave. These reflections will show not what we wish to see, but what we most fear or deny. To advance, we must face ourselves without deceit. The mirrors rippled, and my own reflection morphed, showing moments of doubt, despair, and temptation. I saw myself abandoning the path of righteousness, succumbing to bitterness or fear. The vision was a warning, a possibility, a shadow of the soul. Eleanor's reflection was no less harrowing. Visions of betrayal, loss of faith in family, surrender to vengeance. Clara's showed the struggle between loyalty and ambition, the thin line she walked between protector and potential traitor. Holmes's own reflection was the sternest, revealing the weight of isolation and obsession, his relentless pursuit of truth often at the cost of personal connection. Only by accepting these shadows as part of ourselves, Holmes intoned, can we integrate our fears and continue without being fractured. We nodded, each grappling with the silent dialogue of the mirrors, until the reflections softened, becoming windows that opened onto starry vistas, pathways of light stretching toward the final threshold. The final trial awaited, a chamber where past and future intertwined, guarded by the cosmic serpent itself, a vast, shimmering presence coiled around a radiant gateway. The orb before us now thrummed in resonance with the celestial guardian, a living testament to the covenant our ancestors had forged. The serpent's voice resonated like thunder and whisper combined. Who claims the heart must bear its burden? To guard the past, embrace the future, and walk the path that no light can show but the heart of truth and shadow. Holmes stepped forward, unflinching. We accept this burden, not for power or glory, but to protect the legacy from corruption and ruin. Eleanor and Clara joined him, their voices steady as one. The serpent's coils unfurled, and the gateway shimmered open, a passage to the unknown, a promise of revelation and sacrifice. As we prepared to step through, the realm around us began to dissolve, the stars fading like embers in the dawn. The trial was not over. It had only deepened our understanding, and the true mystery of Greystone awaited beyond the threshold. Holmes looked to us, eyes alight with determination tempered by caution. This is the nexus of everything, the past, the future, and the choices that bind us. What lies ahead may alter not just our fate, but the fate of the world. With that, we crossed the threshold, plunging into the unknown. Chapter 9, Beyond the Threshold. The transition from the luminous trial chamber to the unknown beyond was less a passage of distance than a shift of reality itself. One moment, the radiant gateway shimmered before us, a portal alive with starlight and serpentine glyphs. And the next, we found ourselves standing on the threshold of a place unlike any I had ever seen or imagined. The air was thick with an otherworldly stillness, as if we had stepped out of time's current and into the silent heart of a cosmic dream. Around us stretched an endless expanse of twilight, neither day nor night, but something in between, a world caught in perpetual dusk, where stars gleamed faintly through a violet-hued sky. The ground beneath our feet was a mosaic of ancient stone tiles, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps that had long since vanished from memory. Between the cracks, faint wisps of iridescent mist curled and twisted like ethereal serpents, as if the very earth exhaled secrets in slow, deliberate breaths. Holmes was the first to move, his gaze sharp and searching as he scanned the horizon where towering structures loomed, monuments carved with the same serpentine artistry that had adorned the vault below Greystone. These edifices rose like colossal sentinels, their surfaces shimmering with a subtle luminescence, as though they were forged from living crystal rather than stone. This realm, Holmes murmured, is a reflection of the Ashburnham legacy at its most elemental, not merely a vault or a sanctuary, but a nexus where knowledge, power, and memory converge. Eleanor stepped forward beside him, eyes wide with both awe and caution. It's as if we've entered the very heart of the myth, the place where the covenant was first forged, and where the fate of the family was bound to the serpent's promise. Clara's hand rested on her dagger hilt, her posture alert despite the surreal calm. And yet, it feels like a trap, a place designed to test us further, or perhaps to hold us captive within its labyrinth. I nodded in agreement. The weight of what lay behind the glowing gateway was immense, but the uncertainty of what awaited here was even more daunting. We began to explore the twilight realm, our footsteps echoing softly against the crystalline monuments. As we moved, the serpentine glyphs along the walls and pillars seemed to pulse with a rhythm, an ancient cadence that stirred something deep within my memory, a melody half-remembered from childhood tales whispered by a grandfather long gone. Holmes paused before one particularly grand structure, an archway crowned with entwined serpents whose eyes sparkled like stars. His fingers traced the intricate carvings thoughtfully. Each symbol here corresponds to a chapter of Ashburnham history, and more. They form a cosmic map, a ledger of events both mortal and divine. Eleanor's eyes flicked to the nearby wall, where a bas-relief depicted a scene of a great serpent coiling protectively around a glowing orb, with figures of men and women bowing in reverence. "This must be the original pact," she said softly. "The binding of the family's fate to the serpent's power and wisdom, but it also suggests a warning, a price paid in blood and sacrifice." Clara examined the relief with a sharp eye. The figures around the serpent are not just worshippers. They carry tools, weapons, and what look like ancient books, symbols of knowledge and defense. It's as though the covenant demands vigilance, not blind devotion. Holmes nodded. Indeed. The Ashburnhams were not passive custodians. They were warriors of wisdom, charged with protecting secrets that could shape or shatter civilizations. Suddenly, the ground beneath us trembled. and a low rumble echoed across the expanse. The serpent motifs along the monuments began to glow more intensely, casting long shadows that twisted like living serpents themselves. A voice, deep and resonant, filled the twilight, a voice that seemed to emanate from the very stones around us. Those who claim the heart must prove their worth anew. The path ahead is veiled in shadow. The serpent's riddle waits for you. Holmes's expression hardened. Another test. The covenant is not easily won. Eleanor's voice was resolute. Then we face it, as we have all along. Together. Clara's grip tightened on her dagger. Whatever lies ahead, we cannot falter. The first trial in this new realm revealed itself as a labyrinth of twisting pathways carved into the crystalline ground, each corridor marked with serpentine runes glowing softly in the dim light. Holmes consulted the Codex's final pages, worn and fragile, but still containing fragments of ancient wisdom. This maze is a living puzzle, designed not only to confound, but to reveal the seeker's true nature. We must read the signs carefully, for a single misstep could lead us astray forever. As we ventured into the labyrinth, the air grew thick with whispers, voices both familiar and strange, carrying echoes of Ashburnham ancestors and cosmic beings alike. The walls seemed to pulse with a heartbeat, and shadows danced just beyond the torchlight's reach. At each intersection, we encountered glyphs that posed riddles, enigmatic verses that tested our knowledge of history, philosophy, and the celestial lore that bound the Ashburnham legacy. One such inscription read, "I twist and coil, yet remain unseen. Through time and space, my scales between. Guard the light, but beware the night. What am I that slips from sight?" Holmes pondered briefly, then spoke with certainty. The serpent itself, the eternal cycle, the guardian, and the trickster. The path ahead shimmered and shifted, confirming the correctness of his answer. But the labyrinth was no mere puzzle of words and symbols. It was alive with danger. From the shadows emerged spectral serpents, winding through the corridors with sinuous grace, their eyes glowing with a malevolent intelligence. We fought with desperation. Holmes's quick deductions guiding our tactics, Eleanor's fierce resolve protecting us, and Clara's swift blade cutting through the ethereal foes. At one point, a serpent coiled tightly around Eleanor's ankle, its cold scales like iron bands threatening to bind her. I lunged forward, freeing her with a cry, the torchlight casting wild shadows on the labyrinth's glittering walls. Exhausted but unbroken, we pressed onward, each step a victory over the dark and the unknown. Emerging from the labyrinth, we found ourselves before a colossal gateway, the final barrier before the sanctuary housing the ultimate secret of the Ashburnham Covenant. Carved into its surface was the image of a great serpent devouring its own tail, the Ouroboros, encircling a radiant sun and moon locked in eternal embrace. Holmes turned to us, voice low but commanding. Beyond this gate lies the core of the Covenant, the truth that has been protected for centuries. But be warned, the revelations here will challenge everything we believe about our history, our family, and the nature of power itself. Eleanor's eyes shone with fierce determination. We've come this far. There is no turning back. Clara's hand rested lightly on the gate, feeling the hum of energy coursing through it. Whatever awaits, we face it together. As Holmes prepared to invoke the final incantation from the Codex to open the gate, a distant, echoing roar shattered the twilight calm, an ominous reminder that the cult had not been idle. The battle for Greystone's legacy was far from over. The great gate before us shimmered like molten silver, the Ouroboros symbol carved with such intricacy that it seemed to writhe beneath our gaze. The twin suns within its endless circle glowed with a light that was neither warm nor cold, but something ineffably ancient, an energy that stirred the very marrow of my bones. Holmes produced the Codex once more, its brittle pages rustling softly as he carefully turned to the final incantation. The air thickened with anticipation, and the twilight realm held its breath. With steady voice, Holmes intoned the ancient words, a chant that seemed to vibrate in harmony with the serpentine glyphs surrounding us. As the last syllable echoed through the expanse, the Ouroboros began to pulse, a rhythm like the heartbeat of the universe itself. Slowly, the gate parted, revealing a cavernous chamber beyond, vast beyond comprehension, its walls lined with towering shelves that stretched upward into darkness, filled with tomes bound in strange leathers and glowing inks. At the chamber's center stood a pedestal upon which rested a single book, larger and older than any I had ever seen. Its cover was embossed with serpents entwined around a radiant gem that shimmered with an inner fire. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice barely a whisper. "The heart of Ashburnham," Holmes nodded solemnly. The codex spoke of it as the repository of all family knowledge and the key to the treasure hidden beneath the estate. But it is also a test, a safeguard to ensure only the worthy may claim it. Clara moved cautiously toward the pedestal, eyes scanning for traps or curses. If this book truly holds the secret of the treasure, the cult will stop at nothing to possess it. We must be vigilant. As Eleanor reached out to touch the tome, the chamber trembled. A low, reverberating hum filled the air, and spectral serpents flickered to life, coiling along the shelves and floor. The guardian spirits of the Covenant, I thought grimly. Holmes raised his hand, and the serpents paused, their eyes glowing softly in recognition. "Peace, ancient watchers," Holmes intoned. "We come as heirs and protectors, bound by the Covenant and the trials we have endured." One serpent uncoiled, its form shimmering with cosmic light, and spoke in a voice like 1,000 whispers. "Only those who embrace the balance of shadow and light may claim the heart. The path ahead will test your soul as much as your mind." Eleanor opened the book with reverence, its pages crackling softly like dry leaves stirred by a breeze. The script within was written in a language both alien and familiar, serpentine glyphs interwoven with archaic English annotations in a hand I recognized immediately. "Francis Ashburnham," Holmes said softly. "The founder, but also a seeker of forbidden knowledge." As we pored over the tome, the codex revealed layers of history, how the Ashburnhams had made their pact not merely with a cosmic entity, but with a force that transcended good and evil, light and shadow. A force that required eternal vigilance and sacrifice. Within these pages lay diagrams of the underground vault, the labyrinth, and most intriguingly, maps that hinted at a network of tunnels beneath the estate, far older and more intricate than any record suggested. "The treasure," Holmes said, tracing a delicate line beneath a faded sketch, "is not gold or jewels, but knowledge, artifacts and secrets capable of altering the course of history." Clara's eyes narrowed, and the cult wants to exploit this power to rewrite history for their own ends. The weight of that realization settled over us, heavy as the twilight itself. Suddenly, a distant roar shattered the fragile calm, a sound not of this realm but from the estate above, a herald of turmoil. The serpentine guardians flickered uneasily. Holmes closed the book with a snap. "Our time here is limited. We must return and confront the cult before they breach the estate." Eleanor nodded, determination hardening her features. "We carry the Covenant's burden now, and the responsibility to protect the legacy." Clara sheathed her dagger. "Then let us move swiftly. The darkness grows, and the serpents of Greystone will not rest." As we retraced our steps through the labyrinth, the twilight realm seemed to pulse with newfound urgency. The cosmic whispers around us now carried warnings and omens, echoes of the cult's encroaching menace. Emerging back through the gateway, the world shifted once more, twilight yielding to the familiar shadows of Greystone Estate. The night outside was unnaturally still, the moon obscured by swirling clouds that seemed to whisper in tongues older than England itself. Holmes's gaze was steel-sharp as he surveyed the horizon. They have moved faster than anticipated. The cult is here, and their plans are far more desperate and dangerous than we imagined. Eleanor tightened her grip on the heart of Ashburnham, the ancient tome pulsing softly in her hands. "We must prepare. The final confrontation is upon us." The estate loomed around us, a silent sentinel steeped in centuries of secrets and sorrow. Yet beneath its grand facade, the shadows now writhed with unseen threats. Inside the great hall, a storm of whispered plans and hurried preparations gathered among our allies. Holmes turned to me, his voice low and urgent. "Watson, we stand at the precipice, not only of our lives, but of a legacy that could reshape the world. We must be ready for whatever darkness the cult unleashes." I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle like armor around my shoulders. As the wind howled through the ancient trees outside and distant thunder rumbled like a gathering army, I knew that the true battle for Greystone was only just beginning. The great hall of Greystone was no stranger to gatherings. But tonight, its air was thick with a palpable urgency, as if the walls themselves were bracing for an inevitable storm. Flickering candlelight cast long shadows across the oak-paneled walls, where ancient portraits of Ashburnham ancestors seemed to watch us with inscrutable eyes. Holmes stood near the hearth, the heart of Ashburnham cradled in Eleanor's hands beside him. Clara moved among the gathered allies, trusted friends and loyal retainers, issuing quiet commands with the efficiency of a seasoned commander. I found myself drawn to the window, staring out into the restless night. The clouds churned like an angry sea, and the wind whipped the bare branches of the ancient trees into frantic dance. Somewhere, distant but growing nearer, the cult stirred. A heavy silence settled, broken only by the low murmur of plodding voices and the crackling fire. Holmes turned toward us, eyes sharp as flint. The cult will not wait for dawn. They seek to claim the heart before the sun rises. Eleanor nodded grimly. We hold the key, but with it comes the target. They know now that the secret is no longer hidden. Clara's voice cut through the tension. We must fortify every entrance and be prepared to fight, not only with blade, but with mind and spirit. Plans were laid with meticulous precision. Hidden passageways were sealed, sentries doubled their watch, and ancient wards, long forgotten but rediscovered within the codex, were inscribed in chalk and salt around the estate. Holmes paced steadily, his mind a storm of strategies. The cult's strength lies in numbers and surprise, but we possess knowledge and the Covenant's legacy. We must turn their own desperation against them. Eleanor unfurled a faded map, tracing the labyrinth's corridors beneath the estate. They will strike where they believe we are weakest, the old catacombs beneath the east wing. A murmur rippled through the room. The catacombs were a place of dread, a twisting maze of forgotten tombs and narrow tunnels, long sealed off after a tragic fire decades ago. I will lead a small contingent to reinforce that sector, Clara volunteered, eyes burning with resolve. Holmes nodded approvingly. Good. Watson, you and I will oversee the defense of the main hall and the northern approaches. The hours crept by like shadows lengthening into night. As we made final preparations, I stole a moment beside Eleanor, whose fingers trembled slightly as she held the ancient tome. You bear a great burden, I said quietly. The knowledge within that book, it is more than just history. It is a legacy of sacrifice. She met my gaze, a flicker of vulnerability softening her usually steely composure. It is the truth of who we are, and the cost we must pay. But I am ready. Holmes approached, his gaze steely. We stand on the edge of a precipice. What lies ahead will test us in ways we cannot yet comprehend. Outside, the first faint streaks of dawn began to pale the horizon, yet the threat did not diminish. The cult's shadow pressed ever closer, a tide of darkness intent on swallowing the light. As the estate braced for battle, I could not shake the feeling that the true test was still to come. Not the clash of swords or the peril of night, but the unveiling of a secret so profound that it could unravel the very fabric of the Ashburnham legacy. Holmes's voice broke through my thoughts. Prepare yourself, Watson. When the sun rises, so too will the final reckoning. The candles guttered, and the dawn's pale light seeped into the great hall, casting long beams across the gathered faces, each one set with determination, fear, and hope. The storm was upon us. The next chapter will carry us into the heart of that storm, the confrontation that will decide the fate of Greystone, the Covenant, and perhaps the world itself. Chapter Kex, The Siege of Shadows. The dawn broke with a muted light, a fragile veil of gray that barely pierced the heavy shroud of clouds clinging to the sky. Outside Greystone's ancient walls, the world seemed caught in a breathless pause, as if nature itself sensed the calamity about to unfold. Within the great hall, a tense silence held sway. The air was thick with anticipation and the iron scent of impending battle. Men and women, once strangers bound only by circumstance, now stood as a unified bulwark against the encroaching darkness. Holmes moved like a conductor among his orchestra, his keen eyes missing nothing, the shifting shadows, the tightening grips on weapons, the whispered prayers muttered beneath breath. Every detail mattered, every heartbeat counted. I, too, felt the weight of the moment pressing on my chest, a drumbeat echoing the pounding of my own pulse. This was no mere scuffle of petty thieves or desperate cultists. It was a siege upon history itself, A war waged not only with steel, but with secrets that could unravel the very fabric of reality. Outside, the first signs of the cult's approach were subtle but unmistakable. A faint rustle among the trees, the distant snap of a twig, a whispered chant carried on the wind. Clara stood at the eastern entrance, her dagger gleaming faintly as she scanned the shadows. Eleanor remained close, clutching the heart of Ashburnham as if it were the last anchor to a world slipping into chaos. Suddenly, the stillness shattered. From the darkness burst a flurry of movement, figures cloaked in black, faces obscured by serpentine masks, advancing like wraiths toward the estate's gates. The siege had begun. Holmes raised his voice, sharp and commanding. "Positions! Hold the line!" The defenders surged forward, swords flashing like muskets barking in the cold air. The clash was immediate and brutal, steel against steel, cries of defiance mingling with the harsh commands of battle. I found myself beside Holmes, parrying a blow from a cultist whose eyes glowed with a fanatic fire. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid tang of gunpowder, the ancient stones of Greystone echoing with the sounds of war. Amidst the chaos, Eleanor remained a beacon of calm, her voice steady as she recited incantations from the Codex, words that shimmered in spectral light, repelling dark forces and binding the shadows that sought to breach our defenses. The cultists fought with desperate ferocity driven by fanaticism and the promise of power. But we held firm, each defender fueled by the knowledge that failure meant the unraveling of everything we had fought to protect. Yet as the battle raged, a new threat emerged. From the depths of the estate's catacombs, a hidden passageway long forgotten, rose a terrible presence. A creature born of shadow and flame, its eyes burning with an otherworldly hunger. The guardians of Greystone turned as one, faces pale with dread. Holmes's voice cut through the turmoil. The cult has unleashed the Serpent's wrath, a guardian bound to the Covenant, but now twisted into a weapon of destruction. Clara dashed toward the creature, her blade singing as she engaged the beast. Eleanor and I joined the fray, the heart of Ashburnham glowing fiercely as we combined knowledge, steel, and spirit against the darkness. The battle was a tempest, chaotic and relentless. Each strike revealed new depths to the cult's machinations. Each retreat forced us to delve deeper into the estate's labyrinthine secrets to find sanctuary and strength. In the midst of it all, Holmes uncovered a chilling truth. One among the defenders bore a hidden allegiance, a betrayer whose actions threatened to undo us from within. The revelation struck like a thunderclap, fracturing the fragile trust that had held our coalition together. As the first light of dawn broke fully, bathing the estate in a pale, fragile glow, the siege reached a desperate crescendo. Holmes and I stood together atop the battlements, overlooking the battlefield below, a tapestry of valor, sacrifice, and shadow. "We face not just enemies without," Holmes said grimly, "but demons within." I gripped my rifle tightly, eyes scanning the faces of friends and foes alike. Then we must be sharper than ever, for the truth and survival of Greystone. The storm of battle was far from over. With every secret unveiled, every ally revealed or betrayed, the legacy of the Ashburnham Covenant twisted deeper into shadow and light. As the sun rose, so too did the reckoning. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid stench of gunpowder as the battle surged like a living storm around Greystone's ancient walls. The sharp clang of steel rang through the courtyard, punctuated by the desperate cries of combatants, friends and foes alike, locked in a deadly dance. I pressed forward beside Holmes, our breaths ragged, senses owned to every flicker of movement. The cultists came in waves, relentless and fanatical, their serpentine masks gleaming darkly beneath the overcast sky. Each bore the mark of the shadowed covenant, their eyes blazing with the fervor of those who believed the ends justified any means. Clara's blade flashed in a blur, her every strike a calculated testament to years of training and unyielding will. She moved with a lethal grace, cutting down enemies who sought to overwhelm us. Eleanor chanted urgently, weaving wards that shimmered like silken webs between us, barriers that repelled the cult's most insidious attacks, though even her power strained under the relentless onslaught. The courtyard became a tempest of fury. A cultist lunged at me with a dagger dipped in venom, but I parried sharply, twisting to drive my bayonet through his side. He crumpled with a strangled curse, but there was no time to linger. Holmes was engaged with a tall figure clad in midnight robes, whose voice carried an unnatural chill as he whispered incantations meant to unravel the mind. "Watson!" Holmes barked, deflecting a vicious strike. "Cover me!" I raised my rifle, firing a warning shot that struck the cultist's arm, forcing a grimace. The man hissed and vanished into the fray, swallowed by shadows. Suddenly, from the depths beneath us came a terrifying roar. The ground trembled as the earth itself seemed to fracture. From a yawning fissure in the courtyard floor, the Serpent's wrath emerged, a colossal beast of scales black as obsidian, eyes burning with unholy fire. It towered above us, its great maw filled with jagged fangs dripping with a venom that sizzled as it struck the stone. The cultists rallied behind the beast, their cries escalating into a frenzied cacophony. Holmes shouted, "Hold the line! We must not let the creature breach the main hall." Clara charged, her voice ringing clear. "For Greystone!" She struck the beast's foreleg with a blade tipped in silver, but the creature howled, striking back with a whip-like tail that sent her sprawling. Eleanor's voice rose, chanting the protective rites of the Covenant as spectral chains of light sprang from the heart of Ashburnham, attempting to bind the beast. The creature roared in rage, shaking off the chains with a violent thrash. The battle turned desperate. Our forces strained under the dual threat of cultist fanaticism and the monster's raw destructive power. The ancient stones cracked beneath the assault, and fires began to blaze in the shadows of the estate. Amid the chaos, Holmes's keen eyes caught a figure moving stealthily through the turmoil, one of our own, cloaked in doubt and betrayal. "Watson," he hissed, "the traitor moves to the vault." I knew then that the fight was not only for survival, but for the very soul of Greystone. With a nod, I broke away from the front lines, racing toward the labyrinthine corridors that led to the vault beneath the mansion. The passage was narrow and dark, the air thick with dust and ancient secrets. Ahead, a faint flicker of torchlight betrayed the traitor's presence. I quickened my pace, heart pounding. The figure paused, turning slowly. The mask came off, revealing a face twisted by greed and desperation, the eldest Ashburnham cousin, Edmund, his eyes wild with fanaticism. "Edmund," I called, "you betray your blood for shadows?" He sneered. "Blood means nothing in the face of power, Watson. With the heart, I will remake this world. The cult's promise is salvation." I drew my revolver, aiming steadily. "Not while I draw breath." Behind me, footsteps echoed. Holmes had followed. Together, we confronted Edmund, whose resolve faltered as the weight of his betrayal became clear. In a tense exchange, words and threats flew, Edmund's fanaticism clashing with Holmes's relentless logic and my own resolve. The vault's door loomed behind him, ajar and beckoning with dark promise. Suddenly, a rumble shook the chamber. The Serpent's wrath's roar echoed above, a reminder that the battle outside was far from over. Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Edmund, your greed endangers us all. Surrender the heart and save what remains." For a moment, silence fell. Then, with a cruel laugh, Edmund lunged toward the vault, clutching the ancient tome. I fired. The bullet found its mark in Edmund's shoulder, sending him sprawling. The heart of Ashburnham slipped from his grasp, tumbling to the floor. Holmes caught it, the tome pulsing with eerie light in his hands. As the first victorious cries rang out beyond the vault's walls, the cultists began to retreat, their fanatical grip broken by the loss of their prize. The beast snarled, its form beginning to dissolve into shadow as Eleanor's wards tightened their hold. Exhausted, we regrouped, the estate scarred but standing. Holmes looked to the horizon, his expression grim yet resolute. This victory is but a breath in the long night. The secrets we hold are more dangerous than any blade. We must unravel them, before darkness claims us all. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Beneath Greystone lay deeper mysteries, waiting in shadows darker than any we had yet faced. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, I knew the true test, the unraveling of the Covenant's greatest secret, was yet to come. The battlefield fell silent, save for the crackling of dying fires and the ragged breaths of those who survived. The moon, now high in the ink-black sky, cast a pale, ghostly light over the scarred earth and shattered stones of Greystone's courtyard. The scent of smoke and blood lingered, mingling with the heavy dampness of a night that had witnessed carnage and desperation. Holmes stood near the fallen heart of Ashburnham, now safely secured once more within its protective case. His eyes, sharp and restless, scanned the wreckage with the meticulousness of a surgeon studying a wound. Every detail mattered, for within the destruction lay the clues to a deeper puzzle. I remained close by, tending to Clara, who leaned against a broken pillar, her breathing shallow but steady. The silver blade she wielded was smeared with dark stains, not just the blood of cultists, but something fouler, more ancient. Eleanor knelt beside the glowing wards she had woven, now flickering weakly, but still shimmering faintly against the encroaching shadows. She seemed drained, the weight of her lineage etched deeply in the lines of her face. "The immediate threat is quelled," Holmes murmured, voice low but resolute, "but the scars left behind run far deeper." He motioned toward the vault's entrance, where Edmund's limp form was guarded by 2 loyal retainers. His face was pale, the fanatic fire extinguished and replaced by bitter defeat. "His ambitions have cost us dearly," Holmes said, "but it is not his alone we must fear. The cult has splintered, yes, but factions within it will seek revenge, and the true power hidden beneath Greystone." I glanced at the vault door, its ironwork scorched and twisted from the battle. It was a gate not just to a room, but to the past's darkest secrets. We moved inside, the chamber's cold air a stark contrast to the chaos outside. The vault was a crypt of forgotten history, walls lined with tomes bound in cracked leather, dusty scrolls, and relics that seemed to hum with silent menace. Holmes approached the central pedestal where the heart of Ashburnham had rested. Now, the tome lay open, its pages illuminated by the flickering torchlight. "The Codex," he whispered reverently. "It speaks of the Covenant's origins, not merely a guardian of knowledge, but a key to something far older. Beneath these stones lies a secret that predates even the Ashburnham line." Eleanor's eyes shone with a mixture of fear and awe. "The treasure, the legacy of the founders. It is more than gold or jewels. It is knowledge, power that could reshape the world." As Holmes began to study the text, deciphering cryptic passages and arcane symbols, I found myself drawn to a small alcove where fragments of an ancient mural peeked from behind crumbling plaster. The painting depicted a serpent entwined around a tree, its eyes glowing with the same eerie fire as the creature we faced. Beneath it, shadowy figures knelt in worship, clutching objects that glimmered like stars. Perhaps the very relics the cult had sought. The imagery stirred something primal within me, a warning and a promise intertwined. Whatever lay beneath Greystone was not merely treasure, but a force that demanded guardianship or destruction. Holmes suddenly looked up, eyes flashing. "There is a cipher hidden within the tome, a key to the labyrinth below. It is not just a map, but a riddle, a test left by the Covenant's founders." Eleanor stepped closer, voice trembling. "If we unlock it, we may find the heart of their legacy and the means to end this war once and for all." "But also," Holmes added gravely, "we risk awakening forces best left undisturbed." Outside, the estate began to stir with life once more. Guards tightened their watch, and messages were sent to allies across the county. Yet beneath the surface, the air remained thick with unease. The cult's remnants were regrouping, whispers of vengeance and darker plots threading through the night like venomous serpents. And Edmund's betrayal had sown seeds of doubt and discord even among our closest allies. I stepped outside, the chill night air biting but cleansing. The stars above seemed indifferent to our struggles, distant and cold. Yet as I gazed at the horizon, a single thought burned in my mind. The battle was over, but the war for Greystone's soul had only just begun. Holmes joined me, his gaze fixed on the dark woods that bordered the estate. "We've bought time," he said quietly. "But the true enemy lies hidden, in shadows, in secrets, and in the hearts of men." I nodded, the weight of the coming days pressing down like the heavy cloak of night. "Then we must be ready," I said, "for the next move in this deadly game." The vault's secrets awaited us still, whispering of power, betrayal, and a legacy that could either save or doom us all. And as the dawn crept nearer, promising light yet threatening darkness, I knew our journey was far from over. The heavy iron door groaned shut behind us, muffling the distant sounds of recovery and quiet murmurs from the estate above. Inside the vault, the air grew colder, thick with the scent of ancient parchment and the faint tang of damp stone. The flickering torchlight danced along the carved walls, revealing sigils and motifs worn by centuries of neglect, symbols that seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive. Holmes's fingers traced the intricate patterns etched into the vault's pillars, his expression unreadable. "These glyphs are no mere decoration," he murmured. "They are warnings and guides." The founders of Greystone sought not only to protect knowledge, but to conceal something far more dangerous beneath. Eleanor stepped forward, her breath steady despite the oppressive atmosphere. The Codex hints at a labyrinth, a maze forged beneath the estate, designed to guard the Covenant's deepest secret. Only those who understand the riddles can hope to reach the heart. I shone my lantern on the tome Holmes held open, a page filled with cryptic verses and arcane diagrams. "Here," Holmes said, "is the cipher. It's written in an ancient tongue, but the reference to the serpent's eye is clear. That must be the key." His eyes gleamed as he deciphered line by line, revealing a map interwoven with allegory, paths that twisted like coiling serpents, traps that promised doom, and chambers where knowledge and peril coexisted. We advanced cautiously, following the cryptic directions that led from the vault's inner sanctum toward a narrow staircase descending into shadow. The walls closed in, cold stones slick with moisture, echoing the distant drip of unseen water. Each step carried us deeper into the earth, and deeper into the Covenant's enigma. At the base of the stairs, we entered a vast subterranean chamber. The vaulted ceiling arched overhead, adorned with faded frescoes depicting ancient rites and a serpent coiled protectively around a tree, an eternal sentinel guarding secrets lost to time. Eleanor's voice broke the silence. "This is the heart of the labyrinth. Here, the founders sealed their most precious legacy." Holmes nodded. "And here we must tread carefully. The slightest misstep could trigger traps designed to deter even the most determined seekers." Our progress was slow, deliberate. Each corridor tested our wits and resolve. Pressure plates hidden beneath cracked tiles, inscriptions that demanded precise translations, and illusions that played tricks on the eye. These were the guardians of knowledge. At one point, a sudden rumble sent dust cascading from the ceiling, and a hidden door slammed shut behind us. Holmes's calm steadied us. "A trial of trust," he said. "We must work together, or we will be lost to the shadows." As we navigated the labyrinth's puzzles, fragments of the past whispered around us, echoes of the founders' fears, hopes, and sacrifices. The Covenant was not merely a repository of books. It was a living legacy, bound by oath and blood. Finally, we reached a chamber unlike any before, a sanctum illuminated by a spectral glow. At its center stood an altar, upon which rested an ornate box carved from black onyx and inlaid with serpentine silver. Holmes approached with reverence, lifting the lid to reveal a small, crystalline orb, the serpent's eye. It pulsed softly, as if breathing. "This is the true heart of the Covenant," Holmes breathed. "A source of power and knowledge locked away to prevent misuse." Eleanor's hand hovered over the orb, hesitant. The cult sought this, to wield its power for destruction. I felt a chill. The weight of centuries pressed down, the fate of many resting on our decisions. Holmes closed the box carefully. "We must protect it, but more importantly, understand it." He turned to us, eyes sharp and resolute. "Our next move will determine the fate of Greystone, and perhaps the world beyond. The cult may be broken, but its shadow lingers." As we retraced our steps from the labyrinth, the chamber's glowing symbols faded behind us, swallowed by darkness and silence. Back in the vault, the first light of dawn filtered weakly through the barred windows. Outside, the estate stirred anew, healing, wary, alive. Holmes looked toward the horizon. "We have the key, but the door remains unopened. The true journey begins now." I nodded, heart heavy but determined. "Then we prepare, for the shadows are gathering still, and Greystone's secrets are far from safe." With the ancient mysteries unveiled but danger mounting, the chapter closes on a precipice, our minds turning toward the challenges awaiting in the next stage of this perilous quest. Chapter 11. The Web Tightens. The morning light filtered weakly through the tall, mullioned windows of Greystone's great hall, casting long shadows over the polished oak floor. Yet despite the fragile serenity, the atmosphere was charged with an undercurrent of tension, one that prickled the skin and whispered of battles yet to come, fought not with blade or bullet, but with whispered words and veiled threats. Holmes, Eleanor, Clara, and I gathered around the heavy mahogany table, its surface strewn with maps, letters, and the precious tome from the vault. The heart of Ashburnham rested there like a silent sentinel, its dark power both a beacon and a burden. "We have only begun to scratch the surface," Holmes said, his voice steady but grim. "The cult's influence extends far beyond these grounds. Their tendrils reach into the highest echelons of society, politics, commerce, even the crown's own advisors." He tapped a map pinned with threads of red and black that traced routes from Greystone to London and beyond. "Our next move must be as much about intelligence and alliances as it is about force." Eleanor nodded solemnly. "The Ashburnham name commands respect, but respect alone will not hold the balance. We need allies, those with resources and discretion." It was then that a soft knock echoed at the hall's great door. A figure entered, a messenger, breathless and coated in the grime of travel. "My lady, my lord," he began, addressing Eleanor and Holmes with practiced deference. "News from the city. The Society of Antiquaries has convened an emergency session. Reports of the cult's activities have reached influential ears. There are those who demand investigation and swift justice." Holmes's eyes narrowed. Swift justice or a swift scapegoat? The messenger hesitated. "Both, perhaps. There are whispers that the government may seek to capitalize on the unrest, using the cult as a pretext to tighten control over private estates and libraries." Clara exchanged a glance with Eleanor. "We must act carefully. If the Ashburnham legacy is painted as a danger to the realm, we lose not only our heritage, but the very means to protect it." Holmes nodded sharply. "Indeed, we must infiltrate the society, place trusted confidants within their ranks. Knowledge is the greatest weapon." I could see the wheels turning in his mind. Calculating, strategizing. The battlefields of Greystone's vault were but a prelude to this far more intricate war of influence and espionage. Later, in the shadowed corners of Greystone's study, Holmes convened a secret council. Present were Lord Ravenscroft, an aging peer with a reputation for both prudence and ruthlessness; Miss Beatrice Langley, a scholar whose mastery of languages and codes rivaled Holmes's own; and Colonel James Harrington, a veteran of colonial campaigns, whose insight into clandestine networks was invaluable. "Each of you understands the stakes," Holmes began, his voice low and commanding. "The cult's reach is vast. We suspect they have sympathizers even within Parliament. Our task is to expose and dismantle their influence before they can seize the Serpent's eye and the secrets beneath Greystone." Beatrice unfurled a delicate parchment filled with cryptic annotations. "I have intercepted communications, coded missives that suggest a planned exchange in the docks near Wapping. Foreign agents are involved, likely buyers of the stolen relics." Colonel Harrington's gaze sharpened. "Then we have but days to act. The docks are a labyrinth in themselves, ideal for shadowy deals." Holmes stood, pacing slowly. "We shall divide our efforts. Beatrice and I will attend the Society's next gathering, disguised as scholars interested in antiquities. Lord Ravenscroft and Colonel Harrington will prepare a covert operation to surveil the docks." He paused, looking directly at me. "Watson, your medical expertise and steadiness under pressure make you indispensable. You will accompany us to the Society meeting." I nodded, feeling the familiar surge of duty mingled with apprehension. The game had grown infinitely more complex, the stakes reaching far beyond the walls of any mansion or vault. As the council dispersed to prepare, Eleanor pulled me aside. "The cult's ideology is not merely about power, but transformation. They believe the Serpent's eye can reshape society, purge corruption through chaos." Her eyes shone with determination. "We must be vigilant. Their desperation will breed recklessness." The days that followed blurred into a whirlwind of preparation. Letters forged with careful intent, disguises crafted with painstaking detail, and whispered meetings in smoke-filled rooms where trust was a currency more precious than gold. When the night of the Society's gathering finally arrived, the ancient hall in London was awash with candlelight and murmurs of scholarly debate. Holmes and Beatrice moved through the crowd like shadows, keen observers gathering fragments of conversation and coded signals. I lingered near the edges, heart pounding beneath my tailored coat, alert for any sign of danger. Voices mingled, some discussing the latest archaeological discoveries, others veiling their true intentions beneath polite smiles and subtle gestures. Holmes leaned close, whispering, "There, a circle of men with insignias matching those in the cult's correspondence. Observe." We watched as they exchanged folded notes and exchanged glances laced with suspicion and urgency. Suddenly, a man approached, his voice smooth but cold. "You seek knowledge, do you not? Be wary, for some truths invite peril." His eyes locked with Holmes's in a challenge. The night deepened, the intrigue thickening like a fog. Secrets were traded in hushed tones, alliances formed and broken within the span of a breath. As we left the gathering, Holmes's expression was grave. This is but the opening move. The cult's web entangles many, and they are growing bolder. I realized then that the war for Greystone's legacy was no longer confined to hidden vaults or shadowed corridors, but had spilled into the very heart of power. The city streets awaited, dark and uncertain. The next steps would require cunning, courage, and the unyielding resolve to pierce through deception's veil. Holmes's words echoed as we disappeared into the night. In the game of shadows, every ally may be a foe, and every truth a trap. The fog clung to the Thames like a shroud as we approached Wapping docks under cover of darkness, the cold damp seeping through my coat and chilling me to the bone. Lanterns flickered along the wooden piers, casting long, wavering shadows that merged with the mist. The air was thick with the saltiness of the river and the distant cries of gulls, their calls haunting in the night. Lord Ravenscroft and Colonel Harrington awaited us near a cluster of warehouses, their faces set in grim determination. The elder lord's eyes glimmered with steely resolve, while the colonel's grip on his coat's lapel bespoke the readiness of a seasoned soldier, anticipating the first shot of an unseen battle. "We've secured vantage points," Lord Ravenscroft whispered as we huddled behind a stack of barrels. "The foreign agents are expected to arrive any moment. Reports indicate the exchange involves a shipment of rare manuscripts, though likely not the heart of Ashburnham itself. Yet." Holmes studied the shadows with the intensity of a hawk. "They're testing the waters, gauging our reach." The docks were a labyrinthine maze of crates, ropes, and scaffolding, each corner potentially hiding allies or enemies. We split into smaller groups to maximize our coverage. Holmes and Beatrice to intercept the communications, while Ravenscroft and Harrington watched the perimeter. I was assigned to remain close to Holmes, ready to provide aid if violence erupted. Minutes stretched like hours as the tide of darkness ebbed and flowed with the quiet approach of two shadowy figures. They moved with practiced stealth, cloaked against the cold but carrying the unmistakable aura of danger. Their whispered conversation was laced with foreign accents and the rustle of paper. Holmes's keen ears caught fragments. "The eye must be protected. Buyer awaits in Whitechapel. Payment in gold." Beatrice exchanged a glance with Holmes. "They speak of a transfer. This confirms the cult's connection with foreign interests, likely mercenaries or aristocrats with ambitions beyond England's borders." The tension snapped like a taut wire when a third figure emerged suddenly. An unexpected intruder who moved with swift aggression, brandishing a concealed blade. Before anyone could react, a struggle erupted in the shadows, the sharp clang of metal ringing out. I rushed forward, heart pounding as I saw the intruder grapple with one of the foreign agents. Holmes drew a slender, wicked blade from his coat and engaged with a precision that left no room for error. The fight was a blur of movement, quick parries, deft dodges, and a harsh whisper of steel on steel. "Watson, cover the exits!" Holmes barked, his voice sharp and commanding. I positioned myself near the only lit path, the beam of my lantern cutting through the fog. The clash ended abruptly when Holmes disarmed the attacker with a final flick of his wrist. The man crumpled to the ground, groaning, while the other two fled into the mist. Breathing heavily, Holmes knelt beside the fallen assailant and retrieved a small pouch tied to his belt. Inside, I saw the glint of coins stamped with unfamiliar insignia, and a folded letter sealed with an intricate serpent motif. "Evidence," Holmes said, his voice grim. "This confirms the depth of the conspiracy. The cult's foreign connections are more extensive than we imagined." Back at Greystone, dawn crept slowly over the horizon as we gathered once more in the study, the weight of the night's events hanging heavy in the air. Eleanor broke the silence. "We've confirmed the cult's reach extends beyond our shores, and the Serpent's Eye is more than a symbol. It's a bargaining chip in a deadly game of power. Holmes nodded. The political climate will only grow more volatile. We must prepare for the inevitable confrontation, with enemies both visible and hidden. My thoughts drifted to Edmund's betrayal and the fractured loyalties within the Ashburnham family. The cult's influence was a cancer that had metastasized in places we least expected, and now the very walls of Greystone seemed to harbor whispers of treachery. The path ahead was shrouded in danger, but Holmes's steady gaze and unyielding resolve were a beacon in the gathering storm. As I looked around the room at Eleanor's determined face, at Clara's quiet strength, at Holmes's unrelenting focus, I knew this was only the beginning. The web was tightening. The evening descended swiftly upon Greystone, the great estate cloaked in a velvet darkness, pierced only by the flicker of lanterns swinging gently in the cool night breeze. Within the shadowed confines of the East Wing, a secluded parlor shielded from the sprawling mansion's prying eyes, an urgent and secretive meeting was convened. The heavy curtains were drawn tight, muffling the faint murmur of voices from the grand halls beyond. The room was dimly lit by a solitary oil lamp, its amber glow casting flickering shadows that danced along the richly paneled walls and ornate furnishings. The scent of old leather, polished wood, and a faint trace of pipe smoke hung in the air, mingling with the palpable tension. Eleanor Ashburnham presided over the gathering, her posture composed, but her eyes sharp, glinting with the weight of responsibility. Around the table sat the key players. Lord Ravenscroft, his face etched with years of political battles. Clara, whose quiet intellect had been indispensable since the crisis began. Beatrice Langley, now returned from her work within the society's inner sanctum. And Colonel Harrington, ever vigilant and ready to act. Holmes entered last, his presence commanding silence as the others turned to regard him. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," he began, folding his hands atop the table. "The situation grows more precarious with each passing hour." He laid before them the intercepted letter found on the intruder, a coded message suggesting a meeting between the cult's leadership and foreign patrons, planned for the following week in a location known only as the Black Griffin, a tavern nestled deep in the labyrinthine alleys of Whitechapel. Beatrice's voice broke the silence, steady but urgent. The Society's investigation has stirred more than just curiosity. Several influential members have expressed covert support for the cult's aims, hoping to harness the power of the Serpent's eye for their own ends. We face enemies cloaked in respectability. Lord Ravenscroft slammed a fist lightly on the table. Then we must strike before the poison spreads further. If the Crown perceives the Ashburnham family as a threat, it will be the end of everything we've fought for. Eleanor's gaze hardened. We cannot act rashly. We need proof, concrete evidence to expose these sympathizers without igniting a scandal that would engulf us all. Holmes nodded slowly. Agreed. Which is why we must infiltrate this meeting at the Black Griffin. We will learn who commands the cult's strings and what their true ambitions are. Colonel Harrington's hand rested on the table, fingers tapping a steady rhythm. I can organize a discreet team to secure the perimeter. Any sign of trouble, we intervene swiftly and decisively. The conversation turned to strategy, plans to gather intelligence without alerting the cult, disguises to avoid recognition, coded signals for communication, and contingencies should the mission be compromised. Clara, who had remained silent until now, offered a fresh perspective. We must also prepare for internal betrayals. Edmund's actions have shown that even blood ties cannot be trusted. We should vet all within the household quietly. Eleanor nodded in agreement. A difficult but necessary task. Loyalty is fragile when shadowed by greed and fear. Holmes leaned forward, voice dropping to a near whisper. The Serpent's eye is more than a relic. It is a symbol, a source of power that could reshape the social order. Those who seek it are willing to topple kings and burn legacies. A heavy silence settled as the weight of his words sank in. As the meeting concluded, plans were set in motion. Trusted servants were discreetly enlisted, secret codes established, and the household prepared for what promised to be a perilous journey into the heart of darkness. Later, standing beneath the moonlit sky in the estate's walled garden, I found Eleanor staring into the distance, her expression thoughtful yet resolute. The world outside grows ever darker, she murmured, but Greystone must remain a beacon, no matter the cost. I nodded. And with Holmes guiding us, I believe we stand a chance. She turned to me, her eyes steady. The game is changing, Watson. The pieces are moving on a board far larger than we imagined. The night wind whispered through the ancient oaks, carrying with it the promise of secrets soon to be unveiled and dangers lurking just beyond the veil. The next step would lead us deeper into the labyrinth of intrigue, where shadows masked friend and foe alike, and the fate of Greystone hung in delicate balance. Chapter 12, The Poison Within. The dawn broke over Greystone with a pale and hesitant light, casting the sprawling estate in hues of cold gray and muted gold. Yet beneath the tranquil veneer of morning, a storm was gathering, one far more insidious than any tempest summoned by nature. Suspicion had taken root like a silent poison, seeping through the walls and halls of the once united Ashburnham household. As I made my way through the corridors, the usual sounds of morning activity were subdued. The servants moved with nervous haste. Whispered conversations ceased abruptly when I approached. Even the grand portraits lining the walls seemed to watch with judgmental eyes, their painted faces frozen in time, bearing witness to the fracture beneath. In the library, Eleanor sat alone, her fingers tracing the spine of a volume as if seeking answers from the silent pages. Her face was pale, eyes distant yet sharp, haunted by doubts she dared not voice. I stepped forward gently. "Lady Ashburnham, you seem troubled." She looked up, a faint, weary smile touching her lips. "Troubled, yes, Watson, but not surprised. When trust is broken, it is the hardest wound to mend." Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Clara, but her countenance equally grave. "There are murmurs among the staff, my lady," she said softly. "Whispers of loyalties divided and loyalties bought. Some fear the cult's influence has spread too deeply." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "We must root out the source before it poisons the whole house." Holmes entered then, his gaze piercing and analytical as always. "The cult's shadow has indeed stretched long," he remarked. "But it is not only outsiders who threaten Greystone. One among us may be complicit, whether willingly or through coercion." The room fell silent. Lord Ravenscroft arrived soon after, his usual composure strained by the weight of recent events. If the traitor is one of blood, the consequences are dire indeed. Family must be tested as rigorously as any foe. Holmes nodded. "I have begun discreet inquiries, cross-referencing movements, examining correspondence, and observing behavior. Patterns emerge in the most subtle of ways." I watched as suspicion flickered in Eleanor's eyes, then settled like a stone. Edmund's betrayal has left us all on edge, but we cannot let fear dictate our actions. Yet the possibility that others may follow his path cannot be ignored. Clara added quietly, "Even loyalty itself can be weaponized. We must be vigilant against manipulation." The hours dragged into evening as we gathered in the drawing room, each face a mask of concern and guarded apprehension. Holmes shared fragments of evidence, coded letters intercepted, peculiar meetings noted, unexplained absences documented. "Observe the interactions carefully," he instructed. "Deception is a language, and its dialect is spoken through gestures, hesitations, and silences." The tension was palpable as accusations unspoken hung heavy in the air. The once secure sanctuary of Greystone was now a cage where trust was the rarest commodity. As the night deepened, I caught Eleanor's eye and saw the conflict within her, the painful balance between love for family and the harsh necessities of justice. Outside, the wind whispered through the ancient trees, carrying with it the faintest echo of distant footsteps and secrets yet to be revealed. The poison within was spreading, and soon the true test of loyalty would come. The investigation, I soon realized, would be less a dramatic confrontation than a painstaking unraveling of half-truths, subtle signs, and guarded confessions. Holmes, as ever, approached the task with a cool precision that belied the urgency simmering beneath the surface. He moved through Greystone like a shadow, his gaze flickering to every corner, every nuance of human behavior, seeking the hidden thread that would unravel the knot of deceit. Our first step was to compile a detailed log of the household's daily movements, habits, and conversations. Holmes enlisted Clara's sharp memory and Eleanor's intimate knowledge of family dynamics to create a comprehensive map of interactions. One must listen to what is not said. Holmes remarked as we gathered in the library, where the thick scent of parchment and leather seemed to sharpen his senses. Suspicion often manifests in omission. Holmes began with the servants, those who knew the mansion's secrets better than any. He spoke with the butler, Mr. Aldridge, a man of impeccable service, but with eyes that seemed to weigh every word carefully. "I've noticed of late," Holmes inquired casually, "any irregularities in the arrival or departure of goods or unusual visitors to the estate?" Aldridge hesitated, then nodded. "There was a delivery last week, sir. A crate marked simply private arrived late at night. Unusually, it was not logged with the usual entries. I questioned the driver, but he was most tight-lipped." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "Who authorized this delivery?" The butler sighed. "Lady Eleanor signed for it personally." Next, Holmes turned his attention to the family themselves, beginning with the youngest son, Harold Ashburnham, a man whose charm often masked a restless spirit. "Harold," Holmes said during a seemingly casual stroll through the estate's manicured gardens, "have you observed anything unusual among your acquaintances or within the house?" Harold's eyes flickered with a momentary unease. "Only the usual tensions, but there are whispers among the staff. Some fear the cult's influence. Others speak of shadows moving in the night." Holmes's gaze sharpened. "And what is your opinion of these shadows?" Harold hesitated, then admitted, "I fear they are more than mere rumors, but proof eludes us." The interrogation of Edmund Ashburnham was more delicate. Holmes insisted on a private meeting in the study, the room heavy with the scent of tobacco and old books. "Edmund," Holmes began, voice low and measured, "your actions have placed you in a precarious position, but there remains a question of motive. What drives a man to betray his own blood?" Edmund's face was a mask of defiance. "Power. Control. The Ashburnham legacy is burdened by outdated loyalty. I seek to claim my own destiny." Holmes nodded slowly. "And do you stand alone in this desire, or are others ensnared by similar ambition?" The silence that followed spoke volumes. Holmes's methods were as subtle as they were relentless. He observed the slight flicker of a hand, the avoidance of a glance, the nervous clearing of a throat. In his study, he spread before us a complex web of connections. Letters with coded phrases, intercepted correspondence, and diaries painstakingly analyzed for inconsistencies. "Every man carries a secret," Holmes mused. "Our task is to shine a light on those secrets, to discern the truths hidden beneath." One evening, Holmes and I trailed a discreet visitor seen entering the mansion under cover of dusk, a man of foreign origin, garbed in the attire of a diplomat, but whose furtive manner betrayed something far less official. Holmes whispered, "Observe, Watson. This is a man accustomed to the shadows of power." The visitor met with Clara in the conservatory, their exchange brief but charged. Holmes caught fragments of their conversation, a mention of the eye, the vault, and soon. Back in the drawing room, Holmes revealed the results of his inquiry. "The traitor's identity is not yet clear," he explained, "but their reach extends beyond mere theft. This is a calculated gambit for influence, seeking leverage over the Ashburnham name." Lord Ravenscroft slammed his fist down. "Then we must act swiftly before the enemy tightens its grip." But even as plans for action were drawn, a sense of unease pervaded the estate. Trust was fragile, and every interaction was shadowed by doubt. The family members watched one another with eyes narrowed, alliances shifted subtly, and loyalty became a currency more volatile than gold. One night, as I sat by the fire in my chambers, Holmes entered quietly, holding a worn volume he had retrieved from the private library, a book whose obscure reference was said to hold the key to the vault's secret. "This, Watson, may be the final piece," he said, placing it carefully on the table. "But to understand it fully, we must delve deeper into the past and the very foundations upon which Greystone is built." The mystery was no longer merely of missing books or stolen treasures. It was a labyrinth of family secrets, political intrigue, and ancient power, and the path forward would lead us through shadowed corridors, both literal and figurative, where every step carried the risk of revelation or ruin. The following days were consumed by a study so intense and all-consuming that the outside world seemed to recede into a distant haze. Holmes, ever the archetype of relentless focus, transformed the library into a sanctuary of arcane knowledge and whispered secrets. Piles of ancient tomes and fragile manuscripts were spread across the heavy oak tables, their yellowed pages carefully scrutinized under the warm glow of oil lamps. The book Holmes had recovered, an obscure and weathered volume titled Codices et Crypta Antiqua, was no ordinary relic. Bound in dark, cracked leather and embossed with a serpent entwined around a key, its presence seemed almost sinister, as if it guarded truths not meant for ordinary eyes. Holmes gingerly opened the book, revealing pages dense with cryptic symbols, archaic languages, and detailed maps of underground passages and vaults. He traced a finger along an illustration depicting a coiled serpent beneath an elaborate crest, eerily similar to the Ashburnham family emblem. "Observe, Watson," Holmes said, voice low and reverent. "This manuscript is a compendium of secret histories, encoded rituals, and architectural diagrams. It is, in essence, a key, not merely to the vault beneath Greystone, but to the power hidden within." Days turned into nights, the flicker of candlelight reflecting in Holmes's ever-intense eyes. With Clara's help, who was versed in Latin and several ancient dialects, we began the painstaking process of decoding the text. "Many passages appear to be instructions," Clara noted, detailing how to navigate the labyrinthine tunnels below the estate. "But interwoven within these instructions are references to a serpent's heart, a chamber said to contain an artifact of unimaginable potency." Eleanor stood by the window, listening intently. "The serpent's heart? Could this be the treasure whispered of in old family legends?" Holmes nodded. "Precisely. And it seems the cult's interest lies not merely in the books, but in what lies beneath them, something far older, far more dangerous." As we delved deeper, Holmes uncovered a layered history stretching back centuries of the Ashburnham ancestors, entwined with secret societies, forbidden knowledge, and covert power struggles. The estate itself was revealed to be more than a mere home. It was a fortress guarding secrets that many had sought to seize. Holmes's voice took on a tone both admiring and cautious as he read aloud from a passage describing the vault's original construction. Built by order of Lord Reginald Ashburnham in the late 16th century, the vault was designed to protect the serpent's eye and the serpent's heart from those who would misuse their power. The labyrinth was constructed with traps and coded locks, accessible only through knowledge passed down the family line. But what intrigued Holmes most was a final chapter, one almost deliberately obscured, detailing a ritual said to awaken the power of the serpent's heart. The text spoke of bloodlines, ancient oaths, and the dire consequences of betrayal. Holmes's gaze darkened. "This explains much of the cult's obsession and the desperation of our traitor within." Our research was interrupted by a sudden knock at the door. It was Lord Ravenscroft, his expression grim. "Holmes, Eleanor," he said, voice tense. "We have confirmation. A foreign agent has been spotted in London, known to associate with the cult's leadership. They are moving to seize the vault and the serpent's eye." Holmes closed the book with deliberate care. Then time is no longer a luxury. We must prepare to confront this threat before the shadows close in. That night, as the wind howled outside and shadows lengthened within the ancient walls, I reflected on the path ahead. The stakes had risen from mere theft to a struggle for a power that could alter the very fabric of society. The Ashburnham family was no longer merely defending treasures of the mind, but confronting forces that had lain dormant for centuries. Eleanor's voice broke the silence, steady despite the storm of uncertainty. "Whatever lies beneath, whatever dangers await, we must face them together, for the family and for the future." Holmes nodded, his sharp eyes alight with resolve. "Tomorrow, Watson, the final chapter begins. The past will reveal its deepest secrets, and the fate of Greystone, and perhaps much more will be decided." As the dawn approached, the ancient house seemed to hold its breath. The game was reaching its climax, and every player was poised on the edge of revelation or ruin. Chapter 15, The Serpent's Heart. The dawn had barely touched the horizon when we gathered in the shadowed hall of Greystone, the air thick with anticipation and the lingering chill of a restless night. The ancient stones seemed to hum with a silent warning, as if the house itself sensed the coming reckoning. Holmes moved with purposeful grace, his eyes sharp and unyielding, while Eleanor, Lord Ravenscroft, and Clara followed close behind, each bearing the weight of unspoken fears and fragile hopes. The time for words had passed. Now, action demanded every ounce of courage we could muster. Holmes held the codices at Crypta Antiqua carefully, its cracked leather binding worn yet commanding respect. "This volume," he said quietly, "is our guide and our key. What lies beneath Greystone is no mere vault. It is a labyrinth of shadows, traps, and riddles crafted by minds far older than ours." I glanced at Eleanor, whose pale face betrayed a resolve sharpened by grief and determination. "We are ready," she said softly, voice steady. The entrance to the underground passages had been concealed beneath the library's grand hearth. Holmes knelt, pressing a sequence of small, almost imperceptible symbols etched into the stone. The wall trembled, shifting to reveal a narrow staircase spiraling downward into darkness. A chill ran down my spine as we descended, the flicker of gas lamps casting long, dancing shadows. The air grew cooler, heavier, carrying with it the scent of earth and forgotten secrets. At the base of the stairs, the corridor stretched before us, carved from cold granite and lined with ancient runes glowing faintly in the lantern light. Holmes consulted the book, deciphering the cryptic instructions that guided us past concealed traps and false doors designed to confound the unworthy. "Observe the Serpent," he whispered, pointing to a bas-relief on the wall, a twisting figure whose eyes seemed almost alive. "Its gaze marks the path." We moved carefully, each step echoing softly in the labyrinth. Occasionally, a pressure plate or a hidden blade sprung forth, narrowly avoided by Holmes's keen foresight and Clara's quick reflexes. The tension was palpable. One false move could mean death. After what felt like hours, the corridor opened into a vast chamber, the heart of the vault. The Serpent's heart. The chamber was circular, its ceiling lost in shadow. At its center stood a pedestal bearing a small, ornately carved box, the Serpent's Eye, a gem said to hold unfathomable power, nestled within its velvet lining. Surrounding the pedestal were intricate mosaics depicting scenes of ancient rites and family lineage, a tapestry of history woven in stone and tile. Holmes stepped forward, reverent and cautious. "The final test lies here. The book mentions a ritual, one that requires the blood of the Ashburnham line to unlock the chamber's deeper secrets." Eleanor drew a small dagger from her belt, her hand steady. "Then let the past open its doors." As Eleanor prepared to perform the ritual, a sudden noise startled us, a faint shuffling from the shadows. Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Others have followed us," he said grimly. "The cult will not relinquish its prize so easily." From the darkness emerged figures cloaked in black, their faces hidden but their intent unmistakable. The chamber erupted into chaos. Holmes and Lord Ravenscroft moved with swift precision, defending the Serpent's heart against the intruders. Clara darted between shadows, her agility a blur as she sought to protect Eleanor. The battle was fierce. Steel clashed, lanterns shattered, and the ancient chamber echoed with shouts and the sound of struggle. Amidst the fray, I caught sight of the traitor, one of the family members, their face twisted with desperation and greed, attempting to seize the Serpent's Eye. Holmes's voice rang out, commanding and resolute. "You forget, treachery carries its own curse." With a swift move, Holmes disarmed the traitor, and the tide of the conflict turned. As silence fell, broken only by heavy breaths and the distant drip of water, Eleanor completed the ritual. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a staircase spiraling downward even further, toward the true heart of the mystery. Holmes's eyes gleamed. "The vault is but a threshold. What lies beneath will change everything." The dawn's first light began to filter through the narrow opening above, but below us, darkness awaited. A darkness filled with secrets, dangers, and revelations that would challenge everything we believed. The air grew colder still as we descended the newly revealed staircase, the stone steps slick with moisture and age. Each footfall echoed sharply in the suffocating silence, broken only by the soft drip of water from unseen crevices. The faint glow of our lanterns flickered against the damp walls, revealing carved runes and faded frescoes whose meaning was lost to time, yet seemed charged with a palpable, almost electric presence. Holmes led the way with unerring certainty, consulting the codices et Crypta Antiqua with a practiced eye. "This passage," he murmured, "was constructed long before the house itself, possibly during the reign of Elizabeth, if the stylistic details are accurate. The Ashburnham legacy is built upon layers, both literal and figurative, that few outside this family could even begin to fathom." Behind us, Eleanor followed closely, clutching the dagger still stained faintly with her blood, a symbolic offering that seemed to resonate with the vault's ancient power. Clara's footsteps were silent, yet her eyes darted constantly, alert for any new threat. Lord Ravenscroft carried himself with a stoic dignity, but I could sense the tension rippling beneath his calm exterior. We reached the bottom of the stairs and entered a cavernous chamber that defied expectation. Unlike the vaulted, orderly stone corridors above, this space was raw, almost primeval, hewn directly from the living rock. Here, the scent of earth and forgotten ages was strongest, mingled with the faintest trace of something metallic and ancient. At the center of the chamber lay a vast mosaic, centuries old, depicting the intertwined forms of serpents and dragons, encircling a symbol I had never seen before, a stylized eye encased within a triangle, its lines precise and deliberate. Holmes knelt beside it, brushing away the dust. "The serpent's eye is not merely a jewel," he said thoughtfully. "It is a sigil, a key to a power far greater than simple wealth or influence. Legend speaks of it as a conduit to hidden knowledge, a treasure not of gold but of truth." Eleanor stepped forward, placing a hand reverently on the mosaic. "And beneath this?" she asked. Holmes smiled faintly. "Beneath this lies the serpent's heart, the vault within the vault, a place where the most dangerous secrets of the Ashburnham bloodline are concealed." With deliberate care, Holmes traced the lines of the mosaic, pressing on certain tiles that responded with subtle clicks. Slowly, a section of the floor began to shift, revealing a narrow shaft descending even deeper into the bowels of the earth. "We must be prepared for anything," Holmes cautioned as we assembled our gear, lanterns, ropes, and tools salvaged from the library. One by one, we began the descent, the darkness closing around us like a shroud. The walls here were rougher, the air thicker, charged with an almost imperceptible hum that set my nerves on edge. As we reached the bottom, we entered a chamber unlike any I had ever witnessed. It was circular, vast, and lined with ancient stone pillars carved with symbols and inscriptions. In the very center stood an altar of black marble, polished smooth to an unsettling sheen. Upon the altar rested an artifact, an orb of deep green, veined with glimmering lines like the scales of some primordial creature. The serpent's heart. Holmes approached it slowly, eyes wide with awe and caution. "This," he whispered, "is the source of the power that has haunted this family for generations. The cult believes it can grant dominion over knowledge, over life itself." As he reached out to touch the orb, a sudden chill swept through the chamber. The runes along the pillars began to glow faintly, pulsing with an eerie light. Shadows twisted and danced across the walls, as if awakened by our presence. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the darkness, a voice cold and filled with menace. "You trespass where you should not." From the shadows emerged the cult's leader, the foreign agent we had encountered earlier, flanked by the remaining loyal conspirators. Their faces were masks of fury and desperation. Holmes stepped forward, unflinching. "Your machinations end here. This power is not yours to command." The final confrontation was as much a battle of wills as of weapons. Words were exchanged with venomous precision, threats laced with dark promises and veiled truths. The cult leader revealed the true extent of their ambitions, not merely to sell the Ashburnham treasures, but to harness the serpent's heart to reshape the very fabric of power in England. Yet Holmes was undeterred, his intellect a blade cutting through the lies and deception. With a sudden move, he disrupted the ritual the cultists attempted to perform, breaking their hold on the chamber's magic. Chaos erupted once more, but this time we held the advantage. The cultists, deprived of their ritual's power, faltered and were subdued. Eleanor sealed the chamber's entrance behind us with ancient mechanisms Holmes deciphered from the book, ensuring the serpent's heart would remain protected. As the dust settled and dawn's first rays filtered through the upper corridors, I found myself reflecting on the journey we had undertaken. From the stolen books to the heart of an ancient mystery that intertwined knowledge, power, and betrayal. Holmes stood beside me, gaze distant yet resolute. "This case," he said quietly, "reminds us that some secrets are better kept hidden, yet the pursuit of truth remains a path fraught with peril and wonder." Eleanor, Clara, and Lord Ravenscroft joined us, their faces weary but triumphant. The Ashburnham legacy, with all its shadows and light, had endured once more. But as we emerged from the depths, I could not help but feel that the story was far from over. For within every secret lies the seed of another mystery, and the serpent's heart, though safeguarded, pulsed with a power that would one day awaken again. As we ascended the narrow stairway from the vault's abyss, the weight of what we had uncovered settled heavily upon my mind. The first rays of morning cast pale light through the heavy drapes of Greystone's great hall, illuminating the faces around me, some marked by exhaustion, others by a quiet sense of victory. Yet beneath it all, I sensed the stirrings of lingering uncertainty, a reminder that even resolved mysteries cast long shadows. Holmes walked beside me, his expression unreadable, eyes ever scanning, as though the case still breathed beneath his skin. Eleanor trailed behind, her fingers brushing the old dagger as if seeking comfort in its cold steel, while Clara's usually lively eyes bore the faintest trace of contemplation. Once safely returned to the library, the scene of our first discovery, Holmes carefully returned the codices et Crypta Antiqua to its place, closing the tome with a faint sigh. "The secrets it holds," he said quietly, "are formidable. Knowledge is a double-edged sword, Watson. The Ashburnham family's past is a tapestry woven with both light and darkness, and the Serpent's heart embodies that duality." I nodded, reflecting on the price paid by the family, not just in the present, but across centuries of hidden pacts and sacrifices. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tremor I detected beneath her calm. "My family's mistakes brought this upon us," she said, "but today we have begun to reclaim what was lost. Not only the books or the treasure, but the truth. That is a legacy worth protecting." Holmes turned to her with a rare softness. "And you have done more than protect it. You've ensured that the power within these walls will not be exploited again." Clara, always practical, added, "The manuscripts and artifacts will need careful preservation and, of course, protection from those who would seek to repeat the past." Lord Ravenscroft, who had remained largely silent until now, spoke with quiet authority. "Greystone is no longer just a family estate. It must become a bastion, a sanctuary for history and knowledge, free from greed and shadow. Aye, we owe it to those who came before us." Holmes inclined his head in agreement. "And perhaps, Watson, this case will remind us all that vigilance is eternal. Every secret uncovered only invites another to emerge." Later, as the household settled into uneasy calm, I found myself wandering the great hall alone. The portraits of Ashburnham ancestors seemed to watch me with silent judgment and fated pride. I thought of the traitor whose greed nearly shattered the fragile balance, and the cult whose hunger for power nearly consumed us all. Yet, despite the darkness we faced, the dawn held promise, a chance to rebuild, to protect knowledge, and to guard against the shadows that lurk in every corner of history. In the days that followed, Holmes returned to his studies with renewed vigor, his mind restless yet sharpened by the case's complexities. Eleanor and Clara took on the monumental task of cataloging the recovered manuscripts, their work a delicate balance of scholarship and stewardship. Lord Ravenscroft began to arrange for new security measures at Greystone, consulting experts and scholars alike. The estate was evolving, not just a home, but a fortress of truth. As for me, I took pen to paper, chronicling the tale with care, aware that the story of the Vanishing Library was but one chapter in a larger saga of secrets and shadows. The names, faces, and mysteries would linger in memory, reminders that beneath the surface of civilization lie depths both perilous and profound. Holmes and I shared a quiet moment by the hearth, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows. "Do you ever tire of it, Holmes?" I asked, voice low. "The endless pursuit of riddles and dangers?" He smiled faintly, eyes gleaming with that familiar intensity. "On the contrary, Watson, it is the search itself that defines us, the restless quest for truth in a world built on deception." I could not argue with that. As night deepened over London and Greystone settled into silence, I knew one thing with certainty. The past may be buried in stone and shadow, but it never truly sleeps. And neither, it seems, does the game. Epilogue weeks had passed since the shadows beneath Greystone were finally laid to rest. The estate, once a fortress of secrets and silent conspiracies, now felt lighter, as if the weight of centuries had been lifted. Holmes and I sat by the window in 221B Baker Street, the London fog swirling beyond the panes. He turned the final pages of the codices at Crypta Antiqua, a faint smile playing on his lips. Some mysteries, he mused, are like books themselves, bound tightly, waiting for the right mind to unlock their stories. And some stories, he added, eyes meeting mine, never truly end. Outside, the city carried on, oblivious to the secret vaults beneath Greystone. But in the quiet moments, I felt the lingering pulse of the Serpent's heart, a reminder that history's deepest riddles often wait patiently, just beneath the surface. And, as always, I was ready. Thank you so much for listening to our Honoring Audiobooks original Sherlock Holmes adventure. We hope you enjoyed the story. Don't forget to leave a comment letting us know which story you'd like to hear next and where you're tuning in from. We love hearing from our detective fans around the world. See you in the next adventure.